Chapter 641. This chapter is Minotaur Berserker. The Siren and the Rainbow Whale Lolth were not on Black Horse Island, so List could not rush to Flower Town quickly, nor could he rush to Fairy Island to see the little fire dragon Leo. So he spent the afternoon inspecting his Thorn Castle. After more than a month of construction, the peripheral facilities of Thorn Castle were basically completed, and the main foundation of Thorn Castle was already under construction. Directly in front of the castle was a canal more than 900 meters long. Yevich's sprite worm, a Pennisetum sprite worm, had just been placed on both sides of the river embankment. Pennisetum was not very useful. It could be used as fodder to feed cattle, sheep, rabbits, geese, fish, and other animals. The mature stems could be made into some grass products, and it could also be used to stabilize the river embankment. The section of the canal near the castle was used to house the apple sprite that List had just obtained, creating a larger apple paradise in Thorn Castle. In this way, the apple orchard of Flower Town Castle would no longer need to be transplanted. Under the cordyceps tree in Apple Paradise, a round apple table was built and a few chairs were placed. In the future, this would be the place where List and the knight held meetings. His future elite orders of chivalry had been determined to be called the Apple Table Orders of Chivalry. It may not be domineering enough, but it was more meaningful. On the left side of Apple Paradise, a shell corridor was built, paved with various shells produced in the territory. It was purely a decorative building. On the right side was the fish spring and the fish spring corridor built above the fish spring, mainly for future outdoor barbecue parties. In addition, there was a well and a bird's nest in Apple Paradise. The bird's nest was for the Chocobo Loki, List's main mount before riding a dragon. On the right side of the castle, a large icehouse had been built. Originally, a flower garden was to be built around the icehouse, but now List directly changed the flower garden into a daisy garden. Yevich had a daisy sprite worm, which could be used to cultivate the daisy garden. Daisies were ornamental flowers in this world, but List felt that they had the value of making tea. There were no chrysanthemums, so the chrysanthemum tea could only be replaced by daisies. There was also a well on the left side of the castle, and there was also a flytrap garden under construction to house the flytraps he had bought from Viscount Jonas. Behind the castle was a horse farm. There are stables and a well on the right side of the horse farm, which are used to raise the horses of the castle and for noble guests to store their mounts. There is a training field in the middle of the horse farm, which is only used for List's personal training. There are several kennels on the left side of the horse farm, mainly for the blizzard beasts. This was basically the main auxiliary building of the castle. By the end of this year, I should be able to live in this castle, right? List asked Jemiah Rammed Earth, the architect who accompanied him to inspect the construction site. Jormaya replied, "Sir Lord, if everything goes smoothly, we will definitely be able to complete the construction before it snows. However, I still need your Blizzard Beast team to cooperate and provide stones and pillars for the construction team." "There's no problem with that. In any case, Dosen and the 8 little ones had nothing to do, so they cast spells randomly and condensed a lot of rock thorns. With this group of intermediate World of Warcraft constantly producing rocks every day, there was no shortage of stones in the territory. Sometimes, when List saw more and more stones piled up, he was ready to plan to reclaim the land. He mainly wanted to reclaim the sea around Black Horse Port and build it into a large haven. Black Horse Island was his independent fief. It was also the place where his career started. Maybe one day he would leave Sapphire Kingdom and Black Horse Island, but the construction on the island would not be in vain. First, all the infrastructure could be sold to the new lord at a discount, otherwise he would have the right to destroy it directly. Second, the talents cultivated in the early construction were the cornerstone of the future. Just like this Thorn Castle, the construction will cultivate a group of outstanding construction workers, paving the way for the construction of more buildings in the future. In case one day he had to sell the castle, The new lord couldn't afford the sky-high price of a few dragon coins, so List would rather push it down directly. Night. The dinner was held in Port Town. The town's officials, the new knight, and the mages were all invited to attend. They remembered the heroic sacrifice of the knight and drank the wine of glory. The flowing food and constant laughter made the banquet full of the winner's harvest smile. This time, the harvest of the expansion order is huge, and the warriors who followed me, your contributions are being counted. Gold coins, titles, fiefs, as long as you make contributions, they will belong to you. List held a glass of wine and said in a serious tone, "The families of the deceased can also receive the rewards and pensions they deserve, I guarantee it in my name. Praise the Lord! Praise the Lord! Praise the Lord!" Waves of praises rang out incessantly. List looked at the excited faces, and the corners of his mouth curled up into an arc, which did not calm down for a long time. What was the purpose of participating in the expansion order so desperately? It's not for today's scene. The increasingly fragrant and sweet flower wine lingered between his lips and teeth, and List was soon drunk. Without using the dragon's do-chi to restore his body, he fell asleep with the help of the servants. But even so, early the next morning, List woke up early, and there was no hangover left in his body. Even if he was drunk again, the powerful dragon's do-chi would still spontaneously and quickly restore his body to its best state. After washing up, after eating a hearty dinner and filling up the living supplies in the gem space, he took his sprites, including Yevich's sprites. Riding on the flower, he quickly rushed to Flower Town. In the afternoon, he finally arrived at the original fief, Flower Town. The town was as prosperous as ever. Isaiah, the administrative officer, greeted him at the port, and even the butler Carter ran to the port to wait. "Welcome home, master." "Good afternoon, Mr. Carter." After sending away the officials and continuing to work, List returned to the castle accompanied by Carter. The castle was no different from before the expedition. Far away, the telepathic connection made him immediately raise his head and see the Thorn Fairy, Ella, flying over while crying. It fell on List's head at once. Wow! It spoke of its longing. List took it in his palm and touched the small leaves on its head. He missed it very much. "Little guy, have you been naughty during this time?" "Wow!" Ella quickly denied it. But seeing the helpless eyes of the butler Carter, List understood that Ella had caused a lot of trouble during his absence. He didn't pursue anything, but motioned to Ella to meet his new companions. The 9 sprites, who were summoned by his mind, quickly looked at each other. Chirp, gulp, ulla, kaka. All kinds of cries came and went, and the atmosphere of these sprites' meeting was obviously not friendly. Ella, who was used to being domineering, was so angry that she put her hands on her hips and yelled at these sprites. Wow, wow, wow. So the sprites fought back. It was noisy in an instant, until List glared at them. "Behave yourself." They reluctantly closed their mouths, and the power of the contract could not be violated. Carter secretly wiped his sweat. "Master, Ella is going to turn the castle over. You have gained so much glory and got so many sprites. I am afraid the castle's worm room will not be able to live. Turn the other empty rooms into insect rooms as well. The obedient elves will stay in one room, while the disobedient elves will be isolated. Anyway, we'll have to put up with it for now. Once Thorn Castle is completed, there will be brand new insect rooms for every elf to live in." Chapter 642. Whoa! Ella, who had been locked in a box, issued an unwilling protest. In the end, she could not resist List's discipline, and obediently lay down and slept. List took the time to ride the chocobo Loki to the seaside castle. Achi was not in the castle, nor was the 7-colored whale Lolth. Only the giant algae sprite Parker, along with 3 giant algae sprites and 8 giant algae sprite worms, were swimming freely in the pool. Upon seeing Liszt, Parker immediately opened his mouth full of sharp teeth and laughed heartily. "Wow, Liszt, you're back! Achi said that you were at war. Did you win? Parker has never lost a battle at sea. Do you want me to teach you?" "Thanks, Parker." Liszt reached out and shook hands with Parker, "but I have never lost a battle on land." "Haha, worthy of being as handsome as Parker, Liszt. We are both experts at war." "That's right." Casually echoing Parker's words, Liszt asked, "What about Achi?" "She and that stupid, ugly, big, colorful fish went out to look for worms." "What a bummer. What's so good about those little worms?" "Parker hates little worms the most. If a little worm dares to come to Parker's territory, Parker will tear it in two." "Don't be like that, Parker, you also evolved from a sprite worm." "Haha, but I have evolved successfully and have already broken away from vulgar interests. On the other hand, they are still stupid and ugly little worms." What Parker said made sense. For a moment, Liszt did not know how to refute. He did not know how the giant algae sprite grew up to have such an unkind, arrogant, and narcissistic character. He felt that he should have less contact with Parker in the future, so as not to let Parker affect his character. The sprite contract was very wonderful. It was a two-way contract. It seemed to rely on spiritual power to determine the dominant party. When sprites were weak, the dominant party of the contract was a human. For example, sprite worms could not disobey their master's orders, while sprites could not disobey orders. When the elves became stronger, the leader of the contract would also change. Liszt would find it difficult to directly command Great Elf Parker. If it was a dragon elf that was stronger than a great elf, perhaps the elf contract would be a completely equal contract. So much so that Liszt guessed that if there was an elven king, would the elven king rely on the elven contract to take over the position of the leader and become the master of the humans? Of course, he hadn't even seen a dragon elf before, so he couldn't be sure of the Elf King's situation. He didn't continue to talk nonsense with Parker. He directly asked, "Parker, do you know when Achi will be back?" Handsome Parker doesn't know. "All right, you can continue playing. I'm leaving." "Don't go, let's chat a little longer." At night, in the Flower Town's nameless castle, there was another grand banquet to celebrate Liszt's triumphant return. Lines like the knight's glorious blessing would be performed from time to time. Meanwhile, the Coral Island Tulip Castle. A retainer knight of Lee William was reporting to Levis. Madame Marie, Ralia, and Lytton were listening on the sidelines. This is what happened in the development order. After Sir Liszt was stationed at the trapped Dragon Mountain iron mine for 5 days, he returned by ship in order to avoid the retaliation of the Dragon Knight. He returned to the Flower Town this afternoon. After listening to all the details of the development order, Madame Marie couldn't help but exclaim in surprise, "Ah! The retainer knight didn't know how to tell a story." His description of the ups and downs of the war was dry, but the soul-stirring scenes still made everyone present feel the same. Levis shook his head, an expression of disbelief on his face. "Domain Knight? A Domain Knight that is more powerful than a Perfection Sky Knight? Liszt actually defeated a Domain Knight by himself. He even seized a mine with 1,000,000 tons of iron ore?" As he spoke, he seemed to have thought of something and became excited in an instant. "A mine with 1,000,000 tons of iron ore. When you returned, you had already transported 500,000 tons of iron ore." "That's right, Sir Levis," Lytton asked in a shrill voice. Marquis Wildtow, who controlled the chi of the entire orders of chivalry, was still unable to defeat Big Brother Liszt? He also captured several Sky Knights, one of whom was a sacred swordsman and became his follower? Indeed. There was a moment of silence, followed by the sound of inhaling cold air. Madame Marie recovered from her shock. She clenched her fists and asked, "Therefore, the Tulip family has made great contributions in the development order?" "When I followed Sir, I heard from Sir's conversation with Sir Liszt that Sir's contributions have reached the standard for promotion to a marquis. If the subsequent 500,000 tons of iron ore can also be transported back smoothly, then Sir's promotion to a marquis will be greatly accelerated. Even Sir's promotion will come after the development order ends. Praise Sir List, praise Sir Father. Rolia reverently clasped her hands in front of her chest. May the glory of the night always look after the Tulip family. Immediately after, Rolia asked, "Did Sir Father say when he will return from the Eagle Kingdom? Also, did my father say when he will return?" With the iron ore transportation completed, the development order is basically over. Sir Marquis Roderick, and Sir Messiro should return together. Levis was so excited that he couldn't sit still. He paced back and forth in the living room, constantly asking about the details of the battlefield, and then sent someone to inform Madame Penelope and Olvera. When the old Madame and Olvera arrived at Tulip Castle, they were once again surprised and full of praise. Madame Penelope said on the spot, "Tomorrow we will go to the flower town together. Since the most outstanding bloodline of our Tulip family has returned from the battlefield, we should celebrate the joy of the harvest for him." The commotion lasted for more than an hour. Only then did Tulip Castle regain its peace. After washing up, Levis and Rolia returned to their room and went straight to the baby's bed, taken care of by a servant. Looking at the sleeping baby, the couple showed loving expressions of parents. Levis reached out and touched the baby's tender face, saying, "Tomorrow, go to the flower town and take Richard with you. Let List see his nephew. He is now a top powerhouse under the Dragon Knight rank. This time, all the resources of the development order belong to him. The harvest will certainly be huge." Just half a month ago, Rolia, who had been pregnant for 10 months, gave birth to a healthy baby boy, becoming the eldest son of the 4th generation of the Tulip family. According to the name given by the Count before leaving, he was named Richard Tulip. Rolia was a little worried. Is Richard too small? The road will be bumpy, don't be nervous. Let the servants keep a close eye on him. Put more quilts in the carriage. List is his uncle. Such a powerful uncle cannot be neglected. The Tulip family will have to rely on List's help to promote to a marquis on the Iron Hoof Island. Perhaps it was the intuition brought about by strength, or perhaps it was the change of perspective after becoming a parent, but Levis had thoroughly recognized List's strength. Rolia agreed, "You are right. List is a strong support for the family. We need to maintain a close relationship with him." After saying that, she lowered her head. Chapter 643. List did not know that he already had a nephew. He knew that Loria Golden Ears of Wheat was due, but he did not notice that the due date had already passed. After the banquet, he once again went to the seaside villa and finally saw Achi. "Big brother!" Achi had already learned from Parker that List had returned. She was not surprised, but rather very happy. However, she was not the kind of girl who would act coquettishly, so her smile was very reserved. Ever since she had immersed herself in the world of magic and truth, she had become a lot quieter. The knowledge that was as vast as the ocean always made her forget to return. Perhaps the turmoil of this world was extraordinarily lively in the eyes of ordinary people, but in her eyes, it was only superficial and superficial. Except for List. She would often think of List's smile. Big brother looks really good when he smiles. At this moment, List just opened his arms, and Achi threw herself into his embrace. She immediately smelled the strong scent of alcohol, but also the familiar scent that made her feel at ease. "Achi, how have you been for the past month?" "They're all good. It's just that the magic plants are growing very slowly. Druid magic can't make them grow fast, and there's no progress in the transformation spell. Leo's temper has also become worse. He doesn't like the fish that Achi catches for him. He wants to eat beef, but Achi can't get him any beef. It's fine, I'll deal with Leo." List curled up a strand of Achi's beautiful azure hair and sniffed it. There was a faint fragrance. I heard from Parker that you and Lolth have been looking for sprite worms recently? Yes, Achi recently made some new discoveries in her research of magic. She wants to carefully understand the birth of sprites, but after searching many seas, she still couldn't find any gestating sprite worms. Oh, that's right, Big Brother. Achi found a new sprite worm on the way to the Dodo Island a week ago. Really? Have you contracted it? No, Achi is waiting for Big Brother to contract it. Just in time to go to the Dodo Island tomorrow and contract this sprite worm in passing. After chatting with Achi for a while, Liz took out 2 magic books and handed them to her. This one, The Nature and Development of Blood Magic, was written by my new vampire follower, and this one, The Summary of Great Sorcerers, was jointly written by 3 great sorcerers. Take it for your reference. Ah, vampires! You'll understand after reading this book. List did not explain much as everything was contained in the blood magic book. He took out a beautiful amber and said, "Aren't you studying the birth of sprites? You can have this sprite worm amber. You can slowly study it." The sprite worm amber was dug out from the Flower Town's rocky beach. Apart from being a bit of inspiration for Chris Truth's promotion to a great wizard, it did not have any other use. Therefore, he gave it to Achi to study and see if she could find any new discoveries. After Achi accepted the sprite worm amber, List handed her a hand-drawn map of the ruins. This map is a new map drawn by 3 great sorcerers based on a broken map. It seems to point to an unknown race living in the sea. The civilization of this race has already declined, leaving only some ruins. A race of the sea? I suspect that it might be a race of sirens. But Achi is also a siren. However, Achi is a spirit of the sea. She has been living in a shell since she was born, living alone in the sea. Although she has sensed the existence of other sirens several times, Achi doesn't seem to want to communicate with them. Sirens shouldn't have a civilization, right? What you said makes sense, but I can't think of any other intelligent race living in the sea. List shook his head. It was mentioned in the night novels and magic books that he had read. The intelligent creatures that existed in the sea, besides sirens, were mermaids. Sometimes he wondered if sirens and mermaids were actually the same kind of creature, but were mistaken for 2 different creatures. After all, when humans saw sirens or mermaids in the sea, they should not be able to distinguish the details. However, these speculations were not important. List smiled. The 3 great wizards have already determined the basic area of the relic. When we have time to explore it together, we will know what this unknown race is and what good things it left behind. Yeah. Then, you should rest early. Big Brother, are you going back? Yeah, I'm going back. List stood up, looked at the petite Achi again, and could not help but sigh with emotion. I really want Achi to grow up faster. A blush seemed to flash across Achi's face, but it was fleeting. She also sighed with emotion in a soft voice. Achi also wants to grow up faster. Early the next morning, List directly took Achi to the Dodo Island. Along the way, they found a sprite worm. It was a familiar sprite worm, a seaweed sprite worm. Achi had also contracted a seaweed sprite worm before. However, the territory lacked manpower. Just planting and harvesting giant algae took up a large number of fishermen. They didn't even breed kelp, let alone seaweed. It could only be put aside for the time being. When a new batch of serfs arrived, a large number of fishermen would be trained to carry out breeding operations along the coastline. Coastline breeding and shallow water fishing were projects that the territory vigorously developed. Eventually, it would transition to offshore breeding and distant fishing, fully exploiting the value of the sea. But, why do I no longer feel excited about contracting a sprite worm? Riding the 7-colored whale Lolth on the seabed, List was aware of his tranquility. From hearing about sprite worms to contracting a sprite worm, he had never felt excited. It seemed that ever since he seized the 9 lesser sprites from the expansion order, the discovery of wild sprite worms was no longer an important matter. A wave of plunder in war was equivalent to several years of income from farming in the territory. It would indeed have a great impact. Every year, the Grand Duchy of Sapphire's expansion order attracts a large number of knight participants. Sure enough, there is a reason for it. Even he, who was blessed by the power of fate and could pick up sprite worms at any time, had a great desire for plunder in war, let alone the Baron Knight. Plundering a knight could eat for several years at a time. Why not go and plunder? Just in case the knight glory favored him, he might become an aristocrat. To put it bluntly, I am used to eating big fish and meat, so I have no interest in small vegetables. It was already afternoon by the time they arrived at the Dodo Island. Achi basically fed once every 5 days, waiting on the shore at a fixed time. Now was not the time to eat. However, List didn't care. He climbed the crater and shouted at the sulfur-smelling crater, "Leo, get up and eat beef!" After a few greetings, the tumbling magma in the crater suddenly exploded. Flames rose into the air and condensed into a fire dragon with red and black scales. It was the little fire dragon Leo. Roar! Leo circled in the sky before swooping down and landing in front of List. Its body was clearly bigger than before. When it landed, it squinted at List and breathed out hot flames from its nostrils. Its demeanor and expression gave List the feeling that it was looking down on him. List's complexion sank and he responded in a calm tone, "What's wrong, Leo? Don't you recognize me? Or do you not want to eat beef?" The word beef made Leo stare blankly. Chapter 644. This chapter is, "I Love Your Highness," and will be updated. There was beef. Although Leo was reluctant, he still cooperated with List and practiced to his heart's content. He had only taken some potions for more than a month on the expedition, so his strength increased very slowly. But it could not be said to be slow. Compared to other Sky Knights, he still seemed to practice very fast. But compared to when he practiced with a dragon, he could feel a substantial increase in strength. The growth of his strength alone was too little. It's still refreshing to practice as a dragon knight. But he also had certain concerns, mainly that the improvement of Leo's relationship seemed to have stagnated, and there was a lot of regression. As a prospective dragon knight, he had not yet succeeded in riding a dragon, and he did not have the time to spend every day with Leo and brainwash him to get rid of Leo's alienation. As a result, there was always a deep gap between the man and the dragon. Looking at Leo's exhausted look, he took out a pile of potions and handed them to Leo, and at the same time, touched Leo's hands all over. Leo did not resist his touch, but it did not seem to enjoy it. The good impression that he had accumulated some time ago had fallen back to its original point. A dragon that was difficult to serve. No wonder elemental dragons are mostly evil dragons. This kind of character is really annoying. List played with one of Leo's scales. The scales on its neck, head, forelimbs, and wings were thin and dense, and the scales on its back were thick and large. The largest was even the size of a washbasin. The scales were warm to the touch, and magic could be seen escaping between the gaps, faintly transforming into tiny red sparks. The magic sparks were not hot. They were between magic and matter, and not real sparks. Sometimes he wanted to tear off a scale and bring it back to study slowly, but he did not do so. Feeling the magic attached to the scales and the abundant dragon will inside, List frowned and thought, how did other dragon knights succeed in riding a dragon? Could it be that elemental dragons are so bad that they can't be ridden? The dragons of the major kingdoms are basically elemental dragons and metal dragons. It seems that only 1 or 2 are elemental dragons, and there are no fire dragons among them. He paused. He thought again, or is it because I'm not strong enough? I need to have perfect combat energy to get Leo's approval, ride it and form a contract with it. I should write to Marquis Merlin and ask him what the perfect high-level combat energy is like. Is it similar to the elite Earth Knight's mid-level combat energy? The beginner combat energy of an apprentice knight was very simple. It was to simply extract a special magical power from one's body and call it combat energy. When the Do-Chi sublimated and gained its own attribute, it would advance to the intermediate Do-Chi and become an Earth Knight. When the intermediate Do-Chi reaches a saturated state in the body, one will become an elite Earth Knight. If he wanted to continue training at this time, he would have to rely on the impact of the magic potion to break the shackles of his own cells, thereby allowing him to accommodate more mid-level battle energy. A quantitative change would lead to a qualitative change, ultimately leading to a high-level Do-Chi. The Sky Knight's advanced combat aura was even more unique than the intermediate combat aura. The biggest change was in its lightness. Leaping in the air was easy. When the advanced combat aura reached a saturated state, one would become a perfect Sky Knight. List wasn't very clear about the state of the advanced combat aura at this time. According to the common records, a perfect Sky Knight could start looking for a dragon rider. Perhaps the advanced combat aura at this stage would be of some help in riding a dragon. Or maybe the perfect combat aura could only continue training with the help of a dragon. He guessed that it was the second possibility. He could only rely on a dragon to break through the shackles of the advanced combat aura. Roar! After Leo swallowed the potion, he let out an even more majestic roar. He glanced at List, and without too much reluctance, he directly leaped towards the crater of the volcano and fell into the magma like a meteor. The magma roiled and returned to normal, leaving only steam and the smell of sulfur. The sun was setting in the west. Li Si stood quietly at the crater of the volcano. No one knew what he was thinking. After a long time, he slowly walked down the mountain. Achi was helping the rainbow whale, Lolth, wash the dead skin off her body. Seeing that List had returned, Achi immediately put down her brush and smiled at List peacefully. Lolth also let out a cheerful chirp. She felt a sense of loss from Leo. It was quickly washed away by this heartwarming scene. Compared to little fire dragon Leo, Achi was much more considerate. An evil dragon is an evil dragon. It seems that if I don't use some forceful methods, it will be very difficult for Leo to yield. But how should I be forceful? It seems that with my current strength, I might not be able to defeat it. Even a young dragon had great strength. Just the move of transforming into magic power would be very difficult to truly harm it. Moreover, relying on the environment of the crater, Leo was almost invincible here. Unless, if I take out the volcanic glass and make a weapon, I wonder if it can attack Leo's magic power form? In fact, it should not be called magic power form, but dragon will form. Dragon will was the extreme nature of dragon magic. List had created the name by referring to sword intent. There was no point in thinking too much. He smiled and joined the ranks of helping Lolth brush the dead skin. At night, after resting in the wooden house on the Dodo Island for the night, List got up early in the morning and picked a batch of hemp rope vine seeds and skull fruit. He then left and returned to the flower town. As soon as he arrived at the seaside villa, he saw a retainer knight wandering in the distance. When he saw List, he quickly rushed over. "Sir, you have finally returned. The old lady and Madame Marie of Tulip Castle, as well as Sir Levis and his wife, as well as Baron Olvera, are waiting for you in the castle." "Grandmother, why are they here?" "They have come to celebrate your victories, sir. Sir Levis and his wife have also brought your nephew." "My nephew?" List finally reacted. "Luolia has given birth. It's a boy? What is his name?" "A boy, his name is Richard." "Richard, huh?" List put the seaweed worm into the pool of the worm house, mounted a chocobo, and quickly returned to the castle. When he returned, everyone, including Madame Penelope, came out to greet him, just like every time he returned in triumph. Although the atmosphere was simple, but it was more enthusiastic than ever. Every time he returned in triumph, the enthusiasm he received would skyrocket by a large margin. This was the snobbery aristocrats learned at birth, but Liszt did not reprimand this behavior. It was the nature of most people to despise the poor and love the rich. The strong were worshipped while the weak were despised. Even he himself was willing to look at pretty ladies more than ordinary women. "Grandmother, why did you come to the flower town in person? Since the genius of our tulip family has returned in triumph, how could I, an old woman who relies on the family for a living, not come to greet my genius grandson?" Madame Penelope said calmly. Liszt supported her arm. "I was delayed by some matters. Originally, I planned to go to Tulip Castle in person to present you with the news of victory. It is enough that you have this intention." Chapter 645. The baby looked cute. Of course, Liszt knew that as an uncle, he needed to give a greeting gift, but he wasn't prepared at all. Although he had risen in power in recent years, his family wasn't rich. Giving an elf as a gift was even more inappropriate. Nobles didn't have the custom of giving elves to each other. Maybe I should give him a few books, my self-published personal works? He rejected the idea as soon as it appeared. If it was an adult, books would be fine, but giving a baby books would seem a bit perfunctory. After thinking for a while, he took out a sapphire and stuffed it into the hands of the sleeping Richard. Looking at Richard, he was actually speaking to Levis and his wife. "This sapphire is the gem embedded in my sword Sky Splitter. In the battle with Marquis Wildwave, the Sky Splitter was badly damaged and can no longer be used, but this sapphire is still intact. Richard, I give it to you. I hope you can become a powerful knight like me." This was a good wish. The significance of the gem was great. Nowadays, Liszt was the benchmark for knight, enough to become Richard's life goal. This was not boasting, but a fact. Levis and Rolia were obviously very satisfied with Liszt's gift. "Liszt, thank you for your blessing for Richard. We also hope that one day he can become a powerful knight like you." If it was an ordinary person's blessing, it should be for Richard to one day be able to ride a dragon, but it was more like a courtesy. The goal of riding a dragon was too inconceivable. Becoming a top powerhouse like Liszt should be the lifelong pursuit of all knight. Of course, Levis and his wife still didn't know that Liszt was actually a ghostblade. The news of the inheritance of the ancient warriors was only spread among a few great nobles. There was no need to tell too many people about it. In the era of knight rule, the ancient warriors were doomed to decline. Even if they could still be passed down, the families that held the inheritance of the ancient warriors would keep the secret. After giving the greeting gift, Liszt also received a gift. Unsurprisingly, it was a potted plant brought by Madame Penelope. Using magic eyes to observe, the potted plant didn't have the slightest sign of magic, which made him feel relieved and a little disappointed. His appetite had long been spoiled by the sprite worm bred in the potted plant. Basically, it was Liszt telling stories for the entire afternoon. He had conquered the Snow Pear Castle, which was guarded by the great sorcerer. He had seized the Little River Heart Castle, which was guarded by the Four Bridges. He had resisted Marquis Wildwave, who possessed the Battle Aura domain. He had taken down the White Deer Castle at lightning speed. He had opened up the Golden Waterway between the Roaring River and the Three Dragons River. Finally, he had taken down the iron mine at the Trapped Dragon Mountain. Countless ships went upstream and downstream, loading the heavy iron ores and transporting them away. Compared to the stuttering narration of the messenger knight, Liszt, as the main character of the story, narrated it personally. It was a different kind of feeling and it was intoxicating. Especially the battle with Marquis Wildwave, which could be said to be second only to the dragon-slaying battle. For the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, it might not even happen once in a few decades. To be precise, it had never happened before. Without the inheritance of the ancient warriors, without the secret books of combat aura, they could only randomly grab some resources. Before the banquet, Liszt took his family to see his elf again. Today, he had a greater sprite, the giant algae greater sprite. 14 lesser sprites, thorns, corn, 3 giant algae, wheat, sisal, pea green, corn, coptis, apple, turning white grass, pine, and tobacco lesser sprite. A cheese lesser sprite, the mangrove lesser sprite, and Yevich's lesser sprites, the 2 water peanut lesser sprites. 43 sprite worms, peanuts, alfalfa, 2 thorns, 2 tulip, corn, 2 wheat, tomato, sweet coconut, 2 black nightshade, corn grass, 3 rubber, 4 snake blood fruits, apple, barley, fig, blackberry, pea, smoke grass, green tea tree, Venus flytrap, autumn eggplant, lamb's horn, green ingot, human skull, stone flower, 8 giant algae, and seaweed sprite worm. A cheese sprite worms, kelp, seaweed, redstone flower, ponytail, and inkhorn sprite worm. And Yevich's sprite worms, 100 clams erecta, sweet potato, celery, steepa, ryegrass, daisy, cat's tail, pennisedum, scattered sunflower, forsythia, 2 broom sprouts, stone lotus root, and green radish sprite worm. The total was 1 greater sprite, 17 lesser sprites, and 62 sprite worms. Such a number had already surpassed that of the tulip family in terms of lesser sprites. The greater sprites were equal, while the number of sprite worms was only half. I simply can't believe that your property is already richer than that of an ordinary count's family. Although the family has more sprite worms, but you have more lesser sprites. Levis sighed with emotion. The tulip family's sprites had all been contracted to him, but those given by his father and those earned by himself were 2 completely different feelings of accomplishment. He, Liszt said in a reserved manner. After all, I am a child of glory, and the sprites favor me more. Moreover, if a few more expansion orders are issued, I am afraid that the castle's worm rooms will not be able to accommodate these beautiful sprites. Levis wanted to refute. How could sprites be so easy to obtain? But when the words reached his mouth, he swallowed them back down. For others, sprites were truly rare, but for Liszt it seemed to be the opposite. This could be seen from Madame Penelope's potted plants alone. He and Elvira had brought back many potted plants, yet none of them had ever bred sprite worms. Therefore, he could only force a smile. I believe that such a day will come. The banquet was lively and festive. After arranging the accommodations of his grandmother and the others, Liszt took a bath and lay back on his bed. His spirits from being flattered had yet to completely subside. He recalled the 2.5 years he had spent after transmigrating. Although he had not made any earth-shattering changes, he had also not been unknown and invisible. At least in the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, which was a corner of the continent, he had repeatedly been in the limelight and had become a household name. After the iron mine robbery campaign was over, his name was bound to sweep through the various islands of the kingdom, and everyone from aristocrats to commoners would talk about his name. Perhaps all the young knight would also regard him as their goal, whether it be out of jealousy or worship. I really want to quickly succeed in riding a dragon. My handsomeness no longer allows me to be so low-key. He thought somewhat absent-mindedly. In this world, a knight who was not a dragon was, after all, an ant. Only by becoming a dragon knight would he be qualified to do as he pleased. Slowly, an illusory smoke rose before his eyes. Whenever he was absent-minded or focused, the smoke mission would naturally appear. Huh! His attention quickly returned, fixing on the changes in the smoke mission. Mission completed. Reward: 3 enchanting dragon spirit fruit. The mission has been completed, which means that the Grand Duchy of Sapphire's expansion order has officially ended. Either Dragon Knight Alonso Cypher has rushed back, or the iron mine has been emptied. But what is this reward, 3 enchanting dragon spirit fruits that I have never heard of, could it be? Chapter 646. Liszt was not a person with long-term plans, and always liked to come up with new ideas. But it was undeniable that he was highly dedicated to dragon riding. He had detailed records of any information related to dragons, and listed them in his unpublished List Dragon Taming Handbook. And when he gave the magic books to Chris and Achi to read, he also asked them to record any information related to dragons and give it to him to organize into the handbook. He also often organized servants who could read to flip through night novels to find information about dragons, training, geography, World of Warcraft, elves and other relevant information, and then recorded it in detail. Just the books that recorded information could fill an entire bookshelf. Of course, because they were made of thick bast paper, there was not much real content. The white paper workshop had been researching white paper, and there was already a finished product, but the finished product was not even as good as the toilet paper used in rural graves, let alone writing on it. There was still a long way to go for the research and improvement of white paper, so thick bast paper was the main focus for the time being. According to all the information about dragons that he had read in night novels and magic books that he could buy, there was no mention of something like the dragon's soul fruit. In other words, this fruit was either monopolized by the dragon-raising families, or it was rare and unknown. So, where do I go to find these 3 dragon soul fruits? There doesn't seem to be much of a way to search other than launching a census of the land. Maybe I don't actually need to do anything, and the 3 dragon soul fruits will automatically come to me? No matter what. He was now very excited. Excited by the bold idea that came to him after hearing about the dragon's soul fruit. All his sleepiness and exhaustion were swept away, leaving only his blood boiling. Sure enough, as long as my mental interference is strong enough, I can guide the smoke mission, or rather, pull the threads of fate. Every day I think about how to ride a dragon, the smoke mission will automatically change my fate, and guide me to the dragon's soul fruit, a magical fruit that can charm dragons. After a moment of excitement, he forcibly suppressed his thoughts. He had to consider that the dragon's soul fruit was not the effect he had imagined, so it was not too late to get excited after getting the fruit. At this time, he called out the smoke mission again. Mission: the hand-drawn map of the ruins is not accurate. You will need to search carefully to find the lost civilization of an unknown race. Perhaps it is wandering in a corner of this sea, and the song that rings out will guide you. Please look for the song at sea. Reward: Age Siren. An old siren? It was another surprise. Sirens were magical creatures. Ever since List was obsessed with Achi, he knew how wonderful they were. It was just a pity that this was an old sea monster. The word old always made people think of white-haired, wrinkled, and hunched figures, which greatly conflicted with the pure, beautiful, and innocent image of sirens that Achi gave to List. However, aging, sickness, and death were common occurrences in life, and he was not sad about it. Searching for an unknown race and encountering a sea demon. Does this mean that this unknown race is most likely left behind by the sea demons? He suppressed his previous excitement and began to seriously consider the new mission. The old siren should be more than 400 years old. 400 years of life should be full of vicissitudes of life, and it should be very knowledgeable. At this point, Zhang Xian's eyes lit up. This old siren is simply a living handbook of the sea given to me by the smoke mission. As the saying goes, having an old person at home is like having a treasure. Wisdom was more the accumulation of experience. In the more than 400 years of life, this old siren had been to many places, touched many ships, and witnessed many stories. It was conceivable that she herself was a thick book of knowledge. The next day, after sending off Madame Penelope and the others, he began to plan to find the ruins of civilization. This required Achi's help. Achi, you can sense the existence of the siren within a certain range, right? Yes, brother. Although Achi has never seen a siren of the same kind, Achi has felt the breath of the siren several times and knows that they are not far away. How far is the sensing range? I'm not very clear, but it should be more than a dozen kilometers. Well, Achi, prepare carefully. I'm going to explore the ruins map. Maybe we will encounter other sirens. This requires you to determine their existence and contact them. At the urging of List, Achi did not prepare too much. She quickly packed up her personal belongings and told Nami to take good care of the ducklings on Mangrove Island. List also took the time to write a letter and gave it to Butler Carter for safekeeping. If the Count and the others did not return by the time they returned, he would give the letter to the Count. The content of the letter was not much. It was mainly to entrust the Count with the resources exchanged for iron ore to buy serfs and food. If the Grand Duke sent someone to ask if he was willing to follow him directly, the Count must refuse. For the time being, he had not considered following the Grand Duke directly. At the same time, List also told the territorial officials to carry out an agricultural census. Once new varieties of fruit were found, they must be kept and strictly prohibited from being destroyed at will. Everything would be arranged when he returned. So, in the morning, after exchanging the resources in the gem space, List and Achi rowed the 7-colored whale Lolth to the sea. Achi knew nautical charts, so she could travel freely in the sea. From Coral Island to the roaring estuary, it would take about 10 days by boat, but for the 7-colored whale riding at 80 kilometers per hour, including rest time, it would only take 2.5 days to complete the journey. They traveled during the day, took out the sampan at night, used the water, wind, and temperature beads, and rested quietly. In the blink of an eye, they had sailed into the depths of the vast sea. Occasionally, when Lolth was resting, List would stand on her back and jump up, fly high into the sky, and then take out binoculars to look around. About 900 kilometers from the shore of the roaring estuary, he found a small island in the sea and immediately guided Achi and Lolth to swim to the island. It was not comfortable to always soak in the sea, but he hoped to restore the feeling of being grounded on the island. The island was very small, smaller than Mangrove Island, Stony Island, Sandy Beach Island, and Seagull Island, a small island of less than 100 acres. It was a lonely reef island, surrounded by rocky cliffs, and only a small forest on the top. After approaching, List leaped directly into the air and landed in the grove on the top of the island. As far as the eye could see, it was the same kind of tree, which was relatively short, had very interesting leaves, and looked a bit like ferns. It was the kind of tall trees in the dinosaur era. Most of the ferns on Earth had become short plants, leaving only a few trees like the cyathea. I wonder if there are any elves being bred? Every time he arrived at a green environment, he habitually used magic eyes to look for elves. It was just a routine sweep. But suddenly 3 bright magic feedback points appeared in his field of vision. His heart moved, and he ran directly in the direction of the 3 feedback points. In less than a minute, he arrived in front of the feedback point. There was a circle of open space in the fern forest, and in the center of the open space was a small dead shrub. The small shrub had no leaves, and there were 3 shining colorful fruits hanging on the remaining branches. Dragon Soul Fruit. Chapter 647. According to the inherent impression, List always thought that the 3 soul fruits should be found in the territory, or at least around List. He didn't expect it to be on an isolated island in the vast sea. The dead tree was less than 1 meter high, and on the dead branches hung 3 fist-sized colorful fruits, a bit like apples but rounder. There was no smell and no loss of magic. If he closed his eyes, no matter how List perceived the magic in the surrounding air, he would not be able to perceive the existence of the 3 soul fruits. Only when List used magic eyes could he feel the amazing magic power under the colorful luster. The light of the mana retroaction was a rich chaotic color. The chaotic color was the color of a gray haze, but it was a little more special. Looking at it carefully, it was gray, and then looking at it carefully, it seemed transparent and illusory, but from a different perspective, it could become a substantial smoke. Neither black nor white, illusory and real, like fog and haze. List was not in a hurry to pick the fruit. Instead, He carefully observed the fruit and the dead wood. The density of the magic is almost saturated. It's far more powerful than any other fruit with magic, including the bloodline fruit. Such a powerful magic is indeed possible for the mystic dragon. It was confirmed that the dead tree was indeed dead, and there was no sign of recovery. However, he was reluctant to let it go. He directly took out a bone shovel from the gem space and began to carefully dig the roots of the dead wood. He was ready to put the 3 fruits together with the dead wood into his gem space. Such a precious item must be treated with caution. This digging took more than an hour. Finally, without hurting the roots of the dead tree, the whole soil was dug up, and then he wrapped it in chi and stuffed it into the gem space that had been vacated. After entering the space, the 3 mystic dragon's soul fruits were still shining brightly. List breathed a long sigh of relief. Phew, it's done. The next time I go to the Dodo Island to practice, I will feed the little fire dragon Leo to eat one and see the effect. If Leo is drugged, I will ride directly on the Dragon Tooth platform and sign the contract first. He spent so much to resurrect Leo, took care of him carefully for a long time, found a volcano for him to practice, and delivered food for him. He served him like a parent, but he was not even willing to ride him. Facing such an evil dragon, List's heart was filled with resentment, so he didn't feel any psychological burden when he used such a dishonorable and forceful method. I'm not going to kill it, I'm just going to ride it. He looked at the huge crater left behind. List clapped his hands and patrolled the fern forest on the top of the island again. His magic eye scanned back and forth twice, but he did not find any magical plants. He didn't see any plants of the same height and shape as the dead wood with his naked eye, so he was sure that there was no more value in this place. I can't say that it's worthless. What if there's a sapling that bears the enchanting dragon's soul fruit here? Let's call this island the Soul Island. It's not only a place to stay on the sea, but it's also a place where new enchanting dragon's soul fruit can be nurtured. We'll have to keep an eye on this island in the future. The island was named the Soul Island, and the tree was named the Soul Fruit Tree. After that, List jumped into the sea and left the Heart Island, continuing to sail towards the coastal waters of the roaring estuary. The weather in September gradually turned cold. In the blink of an eye, List, Achi, and Rose had wandered the nearby seas for 2 days, but they did not find the ruins that were marked on the map. They also did not notice the existence of the old siren. They didn't even find a deserted island. Instead, they encountered a few sea monsters, which were easily hunted by Achi and then left for List to barbecue at sea. There were charcoal, hot pot, and other cooking utensils in the gem space, so they could barbecue to their heart's content on the sea. Not only List loved to eat barbecue, but Rose also loved it very much. This kind of life was actually not bad, so he didn't feel anxious. Especially when he was full, listening to Achi's sweet and melodious singing was definitely the highest level of enjoyment. It's a pity that there's no piano in the scene. List felt regretful again. Occasionally playing the piano could cultivate one's mind and calm one's restless emotions. But just as he was indulging in fantasies, Achi's singing stopped abruptly, and she said in surprise, "Ah, brother, Achi feels the aura of the same kind. There's a siren nearby." List immediately got up from the cabin of the sampan. "Really? Can you determine the location of this siren?" "It's a little difficult, the feeling is not very clear, it's faintly discernible." Achi frowned, trying to sense her own kind. "Remember this position, let's swim north now and see if the feeling is clearer." After a while, Achi, who stopped swimming, shook her head. "Brother, the feeling is gone. It seems that this siren is not in the north, let's go back." After returning, the feeling reappeared. This time, List directed them to the south, but the feeling was interrupted again when they reached the south. Then they returned to the starting point and set off west, swimming for a full 10 kilometers. This time, the feeling was not only not interrupted, but also became clearer. This is the direction, let's go. While swimming, List rose into the air from time to time and observed the surroundings with binoculars. After such a long time of exploration, it was basically certain that the siren had not moved, and the possibility that she was still should be between a reef. He found suspicious islands and reefs, which were likely to be the hiding place of the siren. He kept exploring, relying on the connection between a chi and the siren. Before dark, he finally found a coral reef that emerged due to the ebb tide. This was a seabed coral reef that did not surface, but the outline of a white coral reef ring island could be seen, hidden at a depth of 1 or 2 meters underwater. Similar to the ringed reef in Flower Town, this coral island was also ring-shaped. In the center of the ring of the coral reef was a shallow small lake, which was completely surrounded by tall corals. Around this large coral reef, there were several small coral reefs, none of which surfaced. They were almost invisible at high tide, and their outlines could be vaguely seen at low tide. It's here, a chi, let's look for it. List didn't stop, casting magic eyes back and forth between the coral reef. After searching for a long time, the moon had risen, but he still couldn't find the siren's hiding place. In desperation, he had to let a chi try to summon the siren by singing. A chi's ethereal, pure, and melodious singing sounded between the coral reef. After a while, suddenly, from a small coral island in the distance, there was an ethereal, sad, and delicate song echoing a chi's song. This song was equally beautiful, but compared to the simplicity and innocence contained in a chi's voice, its voice was more mature and rich, and one could feel that there were many stories contained in it. Chapter 648. Between the Reef. A huge conch shell shone with magic light, and a woman with a light green, seemingly transparent, but actually opaque water band covering her important parts sat on it. Her body also shone with a strong magic light. Water element magic light. Are you looking for us? The woman asked faintly after seeing List and a chi. She spoke wind whisper. She didn't look old, just like a woman in her 30s, with long emerald green hair draped over her back. There were transparent fin-like structures on her ears, forehead, shoulders, elbows, hips, and calves, which were similar to a chi, but a chi didn't have so many fins. The most exaggerated thing was on her back. There were huge butterfly-shaped fins, gently flapping circles of water. In general, she was more coquettish than a chi, but the degree of anthropomorphism was not enough. A large number of transparent fin-like structures destroyed the beauty, and some parts of her skin also had structures similar to fish scales. Her color was generally green. A chi had azure hair and blue pupils. In comparison, a chi only had a small number of transparent fin-like structures, and her skin was white, delicate, and lustrous, better than the skin of a human baby. She was more anthropomorphic, so she looked more in line with human aesthetics, far better than the old siren in front of them. However, this siren had a complete pair of feet, delicate and delicate. One could imagine how beautiful it would be if a chi also had a pair of feet. Hello, I am a human knight, are you a siren? List rode on Rose's back and smiled elegantly. This little girl next to me, she is also a siren. A chi was not very enthusiastic about the siren in front of her, but simply greeted, hello. The old siren glanced at a chi, then turned to List. Young human knight, I am indeed a siren. What business do you have here? I haven't seen humans for many years, and I didn't even pay attention to the ships passing by Sapphire. Sapphire? List's eyes lit up. You know the Grand Duchy of Sapphire? When I was roaming the sea freely, Sapphire had not yet been founded. At that time, there were no ships on the sea except for ancient shipwreck. It was when Sapphire brought a large number of ships that the sea became busy. The old siren didn't look old, but the moment she opened her mouth, she told a story from hundreds of years ago. Hearing this, List's tone suddenly changed. May I ask how many years have you experienced so far? More than 400 xia and dong. I can't remember them all. Over 400 years old. He was like a living fossil. According to the calculation of a Qi's adulthood, a siren probably only had a lifespan of more than 400 years. List knew that the siren in front of him was the siren that the smoke mission was looking for, and could not help but be more enthusiastic. It's a pleasure to meet the esteemed siren elder here. My name is List Tulip, a Viscount of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. May I have the honor of knowing your name? My name. The old siren looked up at the bright moon reflected on the water, and there was a moment of absent-mindedness. Aphrodite Hector Cynathea Tethys Nemo Temis Parsphone. Stella Briseis. The corner of List's mouth twitched. Why did every siren have to give themselves such a long name of more than 200 words? Your name is very long as my sister's name. Her name is… He turned to look at Achi, as if he could not remember Achi's full name. Achi was very understanding and quickly said her name. My name is Tana Histi Euripamini Sileno Lucati Fulcus Bunius, Cassandra Acheroids, but I have changed my name to Acheroids Truth. You can call me Achi. Truth. You are a siren mage? The old siren was surprised, but as her eyes wandered a little between List and Achi, she had a rough idea. I used to study magic, but I only learned a few simple spells. With a common topic, the conversation was no longer awkward. List smiled and said, Achi is a great mage. A great mage? Such a young siren mage is indeed rare. The old siren nodded gently. You can call me Easy. Elder Easy. Sirens are born in the sea. There are no complicated worldly relationships like you humans. You can just call me by my name. List readily agreed. Okay, Easy. Now that the greetings were over, the conversation gradually turned into List's constant questions, and Easy answered him with her more than 400 years of experience. Although her attitude was always indifferent, Easy was not impatient with List's questions. Achi listened quietly at the side. Easy, I am very curious about sirens, especially my sister Achi, who is also a siren. But she is still very young and needs to learn a lot. I hope you can help teach her. Seeing that the other party was very cooperative, List took the opportunity to make a request. More importantly, he wanted to abduct this siren to live in his territory. However, Easy replied, Sirens don't need teaching. Every siren has its own growth path. Experiencing all the joys and sorrows of the sea is the meaning of Siren's existence. Achi also said, Brother, Achi wants to grow on her own. List was really puzzled by the cold reaction between the two sirens. Achi was very kind and simple, and Easy's personality was also very peaceful. As creatures of the same race, even if the two of them did not have tears in their eyes when they saw each other, they would not be so indifferent. But in fact, from the beginning of looking for sirens, Achi did not have any enthusiasm for unknown sirens. Perhaps there was a certain temperament in sirens that repelled each other. He was going to go back and ask Achi, but now it was not convenient to mention it directly, so he changed the subject. Easy, the purpose of our coming to this sea is to excavate an ancient ruin. I wonder if you can guide us to the ancient ruin. Ancient ruin? You mean the ruins of the Temple of Fish Clown? Temple of Fish Clown? List heard a new word, Fish Clown, in wind language, meant a monster that looks like a fish but is very ugly. Isi extended her slender arm and pointed southeast with a finger that was as thin as a spring onion. Swim forward for about 50 kilometers from here, and you'll find a square coral reef. Swim 30 kilometers south from Coral Island, there is a 100-meter deep seabed puddle, and the ruins of the Temple of Fish Clown are buried in mud. Chapter 649. Ugly undead fish? List heard a new term. Izzy, can you tell me what kind of existence this ugly undead fish is? Do you know about the undead? I know about ghosts and liches. He had met 2 liches, Curtis Truth and the Bull Marquis. The ghost was Virginia Truth, who had been staying in the soul storage tank in his gem space, and would only come out occasionally to chat. I've heard of liches, which are evil transformations that stimulate the power of the soul. The undead is somewhat similar to liches, but instead of stimulating the power of the soul, they use the remaining soul to control the material power of the life. When the ugly undead fish was alive, I suspect that it was at the level of Magic Shooter. Magic Shooter. List's eyes widened. Magic shooters were existences that could fight with dragons alone, and an ugly undead fish was actually at the level of Magic Shooter. This was obviously too exaggerated. It's just my suspicion, and it's the strength of the ugly undead fish when it was alive. It may only have the strength of a great mage now, but its body is very strong. I found the temple of ugly undead fish when I was young, and I always wanted to go in, but it always stopped me outside the temple. Time has not weakened it. Hearing that it only had the strength of a great mage, List was relieved. Magic shooters had not appeared in the eyes of the world for many years, and suddenly told him that there would be magic shooters in a ruin that had existed for thousands of years. He would never believe it. Time would make everything decay, even the representative of the top power like the dragon would die, let alone other creatures. Then List asked Izzy about the specific details of the ugly undead fish. According to Izzy, the ugly undead fish was the strongest of the ugly fish race, and it was imprisoned in the temple of ugly undead fish as a guard. It was 10 meters tall, like a big standing frog, but its upper body was the head and body of a fish. It held a strange harpoon in its hand, which could release powerful water magic. One of the magic was called Water Shackle by Izzy, which could control the water to bind the opponent's body and then tear it outward. When Izzy was young, she was bound once and almost dismembered. After listening to her, List turned around and asked, Achi, do you think you can defeat this undead fish underwater? In the 100-meter deep water, his combat power would be severely reduced, and he might not be able to easily kill an archmage who had the home advantage. Achi nodded seriously. Don't worry, brother. I don't think the undead spirit fish that Izzy mentioned is very strong. Achi has mastered many advanced spells. Water fusion will definitely be able to kill the undead spirit fish. We still need to be careful. List touched Achi's hair. Achi was not to be underestimated in battle. Her fighting style was quite fierce, especially the original spells such as water fusion, which were very powerful. By the time they finished talking about the ugly necromancy fish, it was already late at night. He planned to rest on this coral reef for the night and look for the Temple of Fish Clown tomorrow. At the same time, he would use the night to chat with Izzy as much as possible and inquire about her rich experience of more than 400 years of life. It would be best if he could connect with her and bring her to Black Horse Island as his personal advisor. Now, chatting was the most important thing. Izzy, why was Achi born in a shell, but you were born in a conch? He pointed to the huge conch that Izzy was sitting on. It had a white background with brown patterns. It looked bigger than Achi's shell and had many spikes on it. The conch is also a kind of shell. Every siren is born in a shell. There is no reason for this. It's just that shells are strange and our birth is also strange. Just like you humans have tall, short, fat, and thin bodies, sirens also have different shells and different appearances. When did you grow your feet? My date of adulthood was 55 years old. I was completely free from the growth fluid in the conch shell and had independent feet. She shook her white feet, and her toes were particularly beautiful. List was not a foot lover, and he was still almost lost in thought. But after all, he was experienced. He did not show any reaction on the surface, and his eyes were bright and clear. 55 years old, so Achi is 42 years old this year, and there are still 13 years before she reaches adulthood? 13 years was later than List expected, which was really worrying. Achi, who was listening to the conversation, could not help but feel a little disappointed. Although it was the nature of every woman to pursue youth, it was also natural for minors to want to grow up as soon as possible. Izzy smiled. Who knows what will happen in the future? When I don't have feet, I hope to have feet. Now that I have feet, how can I not miss the time when I didn't have feet? Your words are always very philosophical. Probably because I have seen too much. You must have come into contact with many humans in your life, right? List asked. Izzy's eyes were out of focus for a moment. Then he shook his head and said, I've been on land and I've sought love, but in the end the sea is more suitable for me. But young humans and young sirens, I still recommend you to seek love. Only after you have loved will you know the depth of affection, and only after you have been hurt will you know the value of innocence. In an instant, List felt the temperament of a female scholar lingering on Izzy. Perhaps she was not only a singer on the sea but also a bard on the sea. In that case, can you tell me the story of your life on the continent? Although I'm a knight, I'm also a historian. I'm compiling a monumental work called Dragons Fighting in the Wild, which records the historical changes of the continent. I hope to learn the forgotten history from you. In order to increase her persuasion, he directly took out the first few chapters of Dragons Fighting in the Wild from the gem space and handed it to Izzy for her to study. Izzy took the thick book, flipped through 2 pages, and handed it back. I don't know the Serpentines. All my contact with humans happened in the Eagle Kingdom. It was best not to read it, because the rest was blank. List put away the thick book and said, Then tell me your story. Like most naive and dreamy girls, after Izzy grew her feet, she inevitably had a strong interest in humans. She took advantage of the night to approach the coast to eavesdrop on human life. Eventually, she was discovered by the villagers while eavesdropping. The villagers were very shrewd. They did not expose her on the spot and drive her away. Instead, they coaxed her to live in their home and then told their lord. It was a handsome young nobleman who fell in love with Izzy's dazzling appearance when he saw her. Izzy was quickly intoxicated by the young nobleman's flowery words and lived a happy mermaid love. However, the nobleman eventually abandoned her and married another nobleman girl. And she, after crying, returned to the sea. After a few decades, hearing the news of the nobleman's death, she returned to the land and quietly attended the nobleman's funeral. The scene at the funeral made her let go of the hurt she had suffered. She began to learn human magic and tried to travel the continent to see more local customs. But it only lasted for half a year. The inland environment was really bad, and my skin was getting drier day by day. So I gave up traveling and returned to live in the sea. Izzy said with a sigh. After that, I occasionally went to other seas to live, but I still stayed in this sea where I was born and raised. This was Izzy's life. There were no ups and downs, no life and death parting. Even the only time she was hurt was when she was abandoned by the nobleman. The noble knight still loved her, but because of his noble status, he had to marry a human wife and have children to inherit the family. So he abandoned the siren. The siren's unique appearance and infertility. Chapter 650. The story of the siren Izzy was not earth-shattering, and there was nothing special about her travels across the continent. At least, it was not worthy of being included in Dragons Raging in the Wild. Most importantly, she had never been involved with the nobles of the Eagle Kingdom, so the information she knew was very limited. But her experience was not entirely without merit. For example, she once learned to play the piano from the master pianist Czerny Windmill. Czerny was a famous pianist in the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom. He once traveled to the Eagle Kingdom and met Izzy. He told Izzy how he created his famous song, Euryale by the Water. It was an autumn evening. Czerny, who had traveled around the world, walked to the border between the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom and stopped in the countryside of a small border town. He took the piano he carried with him from the carriage, and was about to adjust it to practice a piece. Suddenly, an elk sprang out of the forest and ran straight to him. But because it was by the river, the elk had nowhere to go and just wanted to jump into the river and swim to the other side. However, a steel fork flew from a distance and quickly killed the elk. Then Czerny saw a banshee with light green hair dancing like a snake coming out of the forest. She had drooping eyelids, a slender figure, snow-white skin, and bright red lips. Czerny quickly fell in love with her. However, when the banshee dragged the dead elk, she only raised her eyelids to look at him. At that moment, he seemed to be stiff and could not move, even his eyeballs could not move. He could only watch the banshee's back disappear into the forest. He did not know how long had passed. When he woke up again, he had been saved by servants and local residents and was lying on a bed. After listening to the local residents, he learned that the banshee was called Uriali. It was said that she was a snake banshee who lived in this forest and had 3 sisters. The eldest sister was called Stheno. She had dark green hair and could kill a powerful World of Warcraft with one punch. Uriali was the second sister. She had light green hair and could fly like a sky knight with one leap. The youngest sister was called Medusa. She had bright red hair and could control snakes. The eyes of the 3 sisters were so powerful that anyone who looked into their eyes would be turned to stone. If the stone was broken, the person would die. If it was not broken, the body would recover in a few days. Normally, the 3 Medusa sisters and the local residents would mind their own business. There had been nobles who tried to enter the wild forest to capture the 3 beautiful Medusa demonesses, but they either disappeared in the forest or returned empty-handed. Not even a trace of the 3 sisters could be found. Czerny coveted Uriali's beauty as well, so he took up residence there. He was looking forward to seeing Uriali again, but unfortunately, he hadn't seen her for many days. He turned his longing into musical notes and composed the famous song Uriali by the Sea. Do gorgons really exist? Liszt was dubious. It was true that vampires and liches did exist, but looking at a snake-haired siren that could petrify people with a single glance felt a little surreal. This kind of ability was too powerful. Moreover, they were incomparably beautiful. Even if their hair was a little strange, it was believed that many curious knights would still flock to them. Izzy shook her head. I've also asked Master Czerny. He told me that the world is far bigger than what we see, and that no one can take everything as they please. In other words, no one has seen the 3 Medusa sisters after that? I don't know. I didn't pay much attention to them. Maybe they're like the sirens. After experiencing the complexity of human life, they returned to their homeland and lived a simple life. In short, Izzy had many stories similar to the 3 Medusa sisters. For example, the Minotaurs roamed the Blast Furnace Kingdom and the barren stone plain. They had horns like bulls and roared angrily to chase away invaders. In the primeval forest in the west of the Grand Duchy of Rose lived giant ogres with clubs in their hands. They lived a life of eating raw meat and drinking blood. Someone had seen a winged harpy flying like an eagle in a mountain in the Eagle Kingdom. The daughter of a duke of a duchy had seen a unicorn in the forest and escaped from her wedding with the help of the unicorn. She did not know where she went. On a full moon night, the howling of wolves often resounded in a nameless castle. It was said that the master of the castle was a werewolf who could transform into a silver wolf. Izzy had also seen a knight who seemed to be riding in midair with nothing under his butt. After inquiring, she learned that the knight was carried by a knight Tharchmount. Only those who had died once could see it. The elderly liked to tell stories. The same was true for the old siren, Izzy. At first, she only answered when Liszt asked. But after midnight, she basically kept telling stories. Some stories were interesting and some were boring. Achi listened carefully. Liszt had already begun to get distracted. Smoke slowly appeared in front of his eyes. Mission completed. Reward: Siren Izzy. Then the smoke transformed into new serpentines. Mission: Siren can guide you, but she doesn't have much strength to swim the sea. You need to go through the hidden dangers in the sea by yourself. Please defeat the remaining necro-ugly fish and excavate the temple of ugly fish. Reward: mysterious jewelry. Oh, the reward is mysterious jewelry? List silently thought. It shouldn't be some kind of shellfish pearl, right? In this world, gems, crystals, and jades were exclusive nouns that referred to 3 types of special stones. Gems and crystals originated from the production of dragons, while jades were formed from the condensed magic power of the earth. And jewelry specifically referred to ornaments. Gems and crystals could be made into ornaments, complete jades could be made into ornaments, pearls, corals, amber, and the like could also be made into ornaments. Gold, silver, mithril, orichalcum, and the like could also be made into ornaments. These were called jewelry. Previously, he already had a black giant clam that produced black pearls, a pink conch that produced pink pearls, and a golden lip shell that produced golden pearls. He didn't know what shell would be given this time, and what pearls would be produced. I hope it's not a pearl shell that produces white pearls. There are many pearl shells raised in the blue dragon lake of the Grand Duke, but they aren't worth much. With this thought in mind, he soon fell asleep on the sampan while listening to Izzy's rambling. When he woke up again, it was already the dawn of the next day. He rubbed his eyes. Looking at the reef in the distance, Izzy was feeding the rainbow whale Lolth with some kind of fruit. This rainbow whale was very friendly to everyone, and sometimes List worried that it would be abducted. On the other side of the reef, Achi was sitting on a shell, holding a book and reading. Seeing that List had woken up, Achi immediately swam over. "Brother, you're awake. Didn't you sleep?" He vaguely remembered that when he fell asleep, Izzy was still telling a story, and Achi was still listening carefully. As a result, when he woke up, the 2 sirens were still full of energy. Achi slept. Sirens sleep for a short time, brother. Of course, List knew this. He just got up and was a little confused. Then he washed up by the reef and ate a sumptuous meal. Then he went to say goodbye to Izzy. "Izzy, your story is very interesting. When Achi and I discover the Temple of Fish Clown, I hope to have a good chat with you again. Falling asleep while chatting isn't a good conversation. Haha." List waved his hand awkwardly. He already knew that Izzy did not refuse. He took Achi in the direction that Izzy had pointed out. First, they would excavate the Temple of Fish Clown, complete the task, and get the reward. For the original, flawless chapter, please go to the Chidien app and subscribe. Sometimes Oldby would find problems and modify it after uploading it. It was difficult to correct it in time through other channels. Chapter 651. 50 kilometers to find the island, 40 kilometers to find the 100-meter deep pit. It didn't take long for List to find the Temple of Fish Clown. It was an ancient ruin full of aquatic plants, and half of it was covered by mud. It occupied a large area, with hundreds of stone pillars supporting the circular dome of the palace, isolating the inside. There were no fish or shrimps swimming around the palace, only the aquatic plants and corals swaying with the current. "Big brother, leave it to Achi to deal with the ugly necromancer." Achi stepped on the shell and stood in front of List, asking for permission to fight. She was born with the ability to control water, and now she was proficient in water magic, so her underwater combat ability was far better than List. The main reason was that once List used his combat energy, he would break through Loltha's magic, rainbow breathing membrane. Once the rainbow breathing membrane was broken, he would have to hold his breath, and it would be very difficult to use his combat energy again. Plus, his combat energy was of the fire element, so it was almost impossible to use it underwater. At most, he could attach it to the long sword and directly attack the opponent's body. "Be careful, I'll help you," List said solemnly with the Ice Soul Dragon slaying sword in his hand. He hadn't mastered the Ice Spin skill of the Ice Soul Dragon slaying sword, and the Freeze skill hadn't been activated yet, so he couldn't increase his combat ability underwater. His main role was to support a Chi in hunting the ugly necromancer. According to Easy's instructions, as long as one stepped into the range of the Temple of Fish Clown, the ugly necromancer would rush out of the temple to chase and kill the intruder. So when a Chi stepped into a corner of the temple, a strong current suddenly appeared. Then, a ghost-like monster came out of the water like a plume of smoke. Just as Izzy had described, the monster was 10 meters tall, and it looked like a standing frog. Its upper body was the head and body of a fish, and its webbed legs were in a circle. Blah blah blah. As soon as the ugly necromancer appeared, it let out a strange, high-pitched cry, then raised the harpoon in its hand, and a circle of magic light rippled on the harpoon. Without any extra work, it directly threw the magic at a Chi. However, a Chi had plenty of experience hunting sea monsters in the sea. She had also raised her water wave shield a long time ago. Then, she instantly cast powerful spells, such as water whirlpool fusion on the undead spirit fish like they were free. Her combat style leaned towards violent output, probably influenced by List. List would always talk about his battle experience. Don't talk nonsense, attack first, don't use a normal attack if you can, and don't be lenient if you can. Chi regarded these experiences as a guideline. As such, he immediately used all sorts of high-level magic. In any case, the undead clownfish wouldn't chase him too far out of the temple of the clownfish. If he really ran out of mana, he would just run away without any hesitation. However, unexpectedly, with the release of a wave of high-level magic from a Chi, the seawater was instantly stirred up into a murky mess, and the mud at the bottom of the sea rolled, as if a black tornado had been set off above the Temple of Fish Clown. The undead spirit fish's resistance magic had been completely annihilated by a Chi's magic. He couldn't retaliate at all. 10 minutes later, a Chi's chest heaved violently, and she gasped for breath. The magic power in her body had reached the bottom. She then began to swim out of the Temple of Fish Clown according to List's instructions. Beware of the undead spirit fish's counterattack. However, after running away, the undead spirit fish didn't chase after her until the magic was released, and the murky seawater was washed away by the current, and the sea became clear again. List and a Chi looked at each other in disbelief. The undead spirit fish disappeared, and a corner of the Temple of Fish Clown was also collapsed by magic, revealing a deep hole. What was even more surprising was that there was a steel fork stuck diagonally in the battle area, half buried in the mud. "Brother, this is the steel fork of the undead spirit fish." "I know." List looked at the quietly collapsed corner of the Temple of Fish Clown, and it took him a long time to react. "A Chi, the undead spirit fish couldn't have been killed by your magic, right? Logically, even if it hid in the temple, it would bring its own weapon back, and shouldn't have left it outside." "Ah, did a Chi kill it? Let's go and check it out." The two approached the Temple of Fish Clown, but there was no movement. They picked up the steel fork that the undead spirit fish abandoned, but there was no movement. They touched the collapsed hole, but there was still no movement. When they entered the temple through the collapsed hole, there was still no movement. Obviously, the undead spirit fish really did die in a Chi's wave of magic. EC's so-called great mage level now seemed like a joke. EC herself didn't have much fighting power, so she mistakenly thought that the undead spirit fish was very strong. After entering the Temple of Fish Clown and confirming that there was no danger, List then looked at the inside of the temple. It was simple but grand, and there was a hint of luxury in its simplicity. Although half of the area was covered in mud, one could still feel the vastness of the inside of the temple. Thick stone pillars supported a simple dome, and on both sides of the walkway were huge statues. With the illumination of crystal lamps, the details of the statues could be seen clearly. "Brother, what kind of monster are these statues? I don't know, but I guess they should be a race of the sea that is more powerful than the undead spirit fish. Achi, look. The 4 statues closest to the door are obviously the undead spirit fish, the same race as the undead spirit fish. The statues at the back don't seem to be undead spirit fish, but more like humanoid monsters. There were 4 humanoid monsters, all with 2 arms. There were also 4 humanoid monsters at the back, but they had 4 arms. Then there were also 4 humanoid monsters at the back, all with 6 arms. The appearance of these 12 humanoid monsters, other than the number of arms and the strength of their bodies, were very similar in other aspects. They had fish scales and fins, and 3 thick fingers held different weapons. Their heads looked like a snake's head, but also like a fish's head, which was quite similar to the undead spirit fish. And then later, another statue of a different image appeared. There were also 4 statues, but they were images of strong women. However, these women were slightly similar to the singing demons, but they looked rough, with some fish scales and fins on their bodies. What was interesting was that the 4 statues that appeared at the back were 4-armed women, followed by 4 6-armed women. Because half of the holy temple was buried in mud, only the upper bodies of these statues could be seen. Liszt rode on the back of the rainbow whale Lolth, feeling that each statue was very large, and seemed to be a replica of the original statue. The 4 undead spirit fish statues at the entrance of the temple were exactly the same size as the undead spirit fish, and all the statues after that were larger than the undead spirit fish statues. Just as he was looking at these statues, trying to speculate some information, Achi suddenly pulled his arm and whispered, "Brother, look at the main seat of the holy temple, is that a mermaid? What a big mermaid!" Only then did Liszt notice that at the end of the palace, in a dim place, there was a huge stone throne. Because the steps were very high, it was not covered by mud. On the throne, there was a vivid statue. The statue had a human upper body and a huge fish tail, perfectly matching the classic image of mermaids recorded in night novels, folklore, and magic books. Her fish tail was coiled on the throne, below the navel was densely covered with fish scales, and above the navel was clean, no different from a human. The biggest difference was that the body of the mermaid statue was at least 20 meters long, which could be said to be huge. However, the next moment, Liszt's magic eye's gaze fell on the huge chest of the mermaid statue. There was a teardrop-shaped jewel shining with an azure-blue brilliance. It seemed to be flowing with water, attribute magic power that was denser than any other magic power. Chapter 652. Gesturing to the 7-colored whale Lolth to swim to the chest of the mermaid statue, Liszt stared at the teardrop-shaped jewel about the size of a fist. For him, this jewel is not small, on the contrary, a fist-sized jewel is definitely huge. However, for the mermaid statue, it is like wearing a broken diamond on the chest, and the size is a bit out of proportion to the statue. Liszt did not reach out and directly take off the jewel, hanging in the form of a pendant on the chest of the statue, but focused on summoning the smoke quest. Quest completed, reward, Tears of the Mermaid. Then a new quest appeared. Quest: the mermaid statue in the Temple of Fish Clown. It is unknown who carved it. Much history has been submerged in the long river of history. The most important thing is to grasp the present. Maybe this Tears of the Mermaid will be given to Achi, it will have an unexpected effect on her. Reward: Guardian of the Ugly Dead Fish. Tears of the Mermaid. Liszt waved the smoke quest away, and then gently took off the pendant. The rope that strung the tears of the mermaid quickly decayed, leaving only a fist-sized teardrop-shaped jewel. Now it looks like a teardrop. Originally, he planned to keep it for himself and study it slowly. After all, it is a treasure left behind by the ancient races. Maybe it will have a powerful effect. But since the smoke quest has given a hint, it is obvious that Tears of the Mermaid is more suitable for Achi to use. After a simple play, he handed the jewel to Achi. Achi, I feel that this jewel has a strong water attribute magic. Look at its shape, it is better to call it Tears of the Mermaid. I will give it to you. Maybe you can study it. Give it to Achi. Achi was a little surprised, and then smiled happily. Thank you, brother. Achi will take good care of it. Not for safekeeping, but for use and research. It is full of water attribute magic. Well, you study it first. I am going to dig out the lower bodies of these statues and see what kind of creatures are carved. List did not talk nonsense, took out the bone shovel, and began to dig the mud covering the temple of Fish Clown. Just as List was busy digging the mud, Achi was already holding the Tears of the Mermaid, sitting on the shell and studying it. She was in a good mood, not only because the Tear of the Mermaid was very beautiful and the blue color matched her temperament, but also because this jewel was given by List. For her, as long as List gave her something, she would be very happy. Big Brother is really good at coming up with names. Mermaid's Tears. And it sounds really nice. It's hanging on the chest of the mermaid statue, and it's shaped like this. It really looks like a mermaid's tears. Channeling magic. He activated the Tears of the Mermaid, and was ready to carefully study the magic structure of this jewelry so that he could figure out how to use it. It had magic power, and it was a pendant. It could be seen that the Tears of the Mermaid was a piece of magic equipment. Moreover, there was even a temple built on top of the statue. Clearly, it was no ordinary magical equipment. Achi did not have magic eyes, but she could feel that the inside of the mermaid's tears was full of flowing magic, and it was very intimate with her. She closed her eyes and let her perception guide the magic, swimming in the magic that made up the magic runes. Soon, she noticed that the magic composition of the Tears of the Mermaid was very regular, and the regular revealed a profound atmosphere, especially those magic runes, which seemed to be not artificial, but naturally generated. There are no traces of artificial carving. Strange, is the Tears of the Mermaid a naturally generated magic equipment, or is it really the Tears of the Mermaid? Achi suddenly thought that it was unlikely, but not impossible, because the mermaid statue was high up in the main seat. The clownfish, who was at the level of an archmage, was only ranked at the end of the temple statue, followed by the six-armed monster, six-armed woman. Each layer looked more noble and powerful. From this, it could be inferred that the mermaid definitely had great power. The metabolites of the body of a powerful creature would naturally also have all kinds of incredible power. For example, any bit of the body excretion of a dragon was a precious treasure. Suddenly, she keenly noticed that the internal magic runes of the Tears of the Mermaid were condensing in a strange pattern, and there was an obvious node in it. The term node was proposed by List, which meant the midpoint of the magic convergence. At first, it was to explain the concept of the magic net, but later, Achi thought that the node could be brought into the magic circle. The magic circle was composed of many magic runes forming a node, which then formed a complete magic circle. If the node was found, the magic circle could be easily torn apart. She could also rely on constantly revising the node to reorganize the magic circle. The reason why she could create many original spells was because of the node concept. So, what is this node for? Thinking, she had already used magic to guide and activate the node. The next moment, the Tears of the Mermaid burst into a bright light. In the light condensed twisted threads like a spider web, spreading around, through the statue, through the colorful whale Lolth, through List who was digging in the mud, through the temple of the clown fish, and through the vast sea. Finally, it dissipated in the distant, endless sea. And holding the Tears of the Mermaid, Achi's closed eyelids trembled, and in less than half a breath, she fainted on the shell. As she fainted, the light of the Tears of the Mermaid instantly extinguished, falling from her hand to the shell, and then cracks appeared on the surface of the water droplet. On the other side, List, who was digging in the mud, was startled by the blue twisted threads that suddenly passed through his body, thinking that someone had attacked him. He hurriedly turned to dodge, just in time to see a chi faint and the light of the tears of the mermaid extinguished. Gotcha! As far as he could see, the tears of the mermaid shattered in the blink of an eye, then turned into a pool of powder, dissipating with the current and disappearing. He had no time to care about how the tears of the mermaid disappeared. He quickly rushed over, picked up the unconscious Chi and shouted, "Achi, Achi!" He was very flustered. Achi was far more important than any other person. Achi did not respond, but her chest was still undulating. List forced himself to calm down, quickly cast magic eyes, and found that the magic in Achi's body was very unstable, in a boiling state. And some magic suddenly disappeared, and some magic suddenly appeared, as if it was constantly exchanging with the magic of the outside world. However, it was impossible for the magic of the outside world to be so abundant that it was constantly exchanging. What the hell is going on? Why did Achi faint for no reason? No, it's the tears of the mermaid. The tears of the mermaid stimulated Achi and made Achi faint. The vision just now was caused by the tears of the mermaid. The smoke mission prompted me to give the tears of the mermaid to Achi. His face sank and he blamed himself. He should have eliminated the danger first and then handed it over to Achi. I hope it won't really hurt Achi. If he hadn't used the smoke mission for a long time and gradually understood that the smoke mission was more derived from the projection of his own will, he would have suspected that the person behind the smoke mission was preparing to attack him. First cut out his important helper Achi, and then deal with him. Just like raising a poisonous insect, when the poisonous insect matured, it could be harvested. I hope Achi will be fine, otherwise. He didn't say the second half of the sentence because he really didn't know how to threaten the person behind the smoke mission. But before he could figure out how to deal with the possible existence of the person behind the smoke mission, Achi woke up slowly, her eyes still confused, but she said a sentence. "Brother." Achi touched the magic network, then she fainted again. Chapter 653. Magic Net. List, who was holding Achi, had his eyes lit up. His previous worries suddenly disappeared, leaving only surprise. She touched the magic net. Achi touched the magic net under the stimulation of the tears of the mermaid? Jonas Moongrass said that an archmage needs to touch the magic net to advance to a magic shooter. It turned out that the smoke mission did not have a mastermind behind it. It was just a projection of his will. Perhaps it was because of his constant subconscious suggestion that Achi could advance to a magic shooter, so there was this mission of the ruins map, and then he got this tears of the mermaid. Thinking of this, List sighed again. He sighed again. I didn't expect that Achi would advance into a magic shooter before I succeeded in riding a dragon. Strictly speaking, she's just an underage girl. I have to say, Achi's talent is really strong. Izzy is also a siren and has learned magic, but she only knows a few ordinary spells. Brushing the scattered blue hair on Achi's face behind her ear, List continued to use magic eyes to observe the situation of magic in Achi's body. The invisible phenomenon of exchanging magic power was like dispelling the clouds and seeing the sun. It was not exchanging with free magic, but connecting to the unknown magic net and constantly exchanging magic power in the magic net. In this way, the source of magic power of a magic shooter is no longer drawn from the free magic of the outside world, but directly from the magic net. Does this mean that even on the battlefield, magic shooters can still rely on the magic power of the magic net to release powerful magic? If this was the case, then the status of magic shooters would instantly rise to a terrifying level. And it was very likely to be true. After all, magic shooters were known to be strong enough to fight dragons alone, second only to the peak strength of the Dragon Knight. Any warrior profession without a dragon would probably not be able to beat a magic shooter. According to the current cultivation system that List saw in the world, the knight had dominated everything, and the inheritance of the ancient warriors and ancient mages were declining. Only magic shooters, although slightly declining, did not go downhill too much. They were still the mainstream cultivation system and indispensable. The knight had the dragon knight, and magic shooters were all peak occupations that suppressed the era. A chi is already advancing towards becoming a high mage. Touching the magic net once is more or less equivalent to connecting to it, and I'm about to succeed in riding a dragon. I hope the enchanting dragon soul fruit will work and charm the little fire dragon Leo. Chirp. Lolth the rainbow whale was wandering around, providing List with the spell rainbow breathing membrane. Achi did not need the help of this kind of magic. Even if she was unconscious, she could still breathe freely underwater. This was an instinct. List saw that she did not wake up for a long time, so he put her into the shell first. While waiting for her to wake up, he continued his unfinished work. The bone shovel easily dug the soil. The lower body of the six-armed woman statue closest to the main mermaid statue was finally exposed to List's vision. The lower body was not a human body, but a huge twisted body. It looked a little like a mermaid's fishtail, but also a little like a serpent's snake body. He continued to dig out a statue of a four-armed woman. After the lower half of her body was exposed, it was also a mixture of a snake and a fish. It was the same for the two-armed woman. Next was the six-armed monster statue. Its lower body was the same, but it had ferocious fins. There was no need to dig out the rest of the statues. He directly jumped over and dug out a statue of a clownfish. The lower body of the statue was an upright frog-like body. Looking at these statues, List pondered for a moment. He said to himself, "These statues are a bit like the Naga in the game. Why don't I call them Naga? The Naga with the upper body of a female is called the upper Naga. They are two-armed, four-armed, and six-armed respectively. The Naga with the upper body of a monster is called the lower Naga. They are also two-armed, four-armed, and six-armed respectively." And so, the race that this fish-clown temple represented had already become clear. The ruler was the mermaid, the middle power was the upper Naga and the lower Naga, and the bottom power was the clownfish. I just don't know if the mermaid, the Naga, and the clownfish should be classified as one species. Judging from their biological form, they should have reproductive isolation. Maybe this is a mixed marine civilization of many races. The mermaid is the ruler, the upper Naga are the nobles, the lower Naga are the civilians, and the clownfish are the slaves? It was a pity that there was nothing else in this temple of clown, except for these statues and the broken tear of the mermaid. It was impossible to restore the history of its founding. If I want to record this civilization into the Dragon Wars in the Wild, I still have to complete it. List shook his head. He had too many works planned to write now, and the Dragon Wars in the Wild had long been put aside indefinitely. Perhaps when he became the Lord of Dragon Domain one day and his lifespan was greatly increased, he would finish this historical masterpiece when he was bored. Time passed by. List ate some dry food underwater. It was already dark outside the Temple of Clown, indicating that night had arrived. He was about to lose his patience, and was ready to take a chi away with the shell and leave this place. At this moment, the magic power in a chi's body suddenly subsided, and she slowly woke up. "Brother! You're awake. How do you feel? Is there anything wrong?" A chi's hazy expression quickly returned to normal, and her pair of blue eyes became brighter and clearer. "A chi is very good, brother. I can't feel better now. A chi was unconscious just now, right?" It felt like a long dream. In the dream, a chi's thoughts turned into a ray of light and swam freely in the sea of magic. List asked eagerly, "Was that the magic net?" A chi carefully recalled and nodded. Yes, it was the feeling of touching the magic net. "Brother, a chi already knows why the mages of the Moon Empire declined." With the help of the tear of the mermaid's magic formation, a chi briefly touched the magic net and felt the vastness of the magic net. It was just that it was shrinking, and only magic shooters could touch it. Tell me in detail. Yes. Achi began to describe the magic net that she had touched with great effort. According to her feeling, the magic net was not a net. It was indeed a bit similar to the field that Liszt had described before, but it still had some of the characteristics of a net. This net, or this field, shrouded the entire world, at least the part that Achi could feel was shrouding every corner of the world. If the magic net had not shrunk, then every mage would be a node and could cast spells with the help of the magic net. But because of the magic net's shrinking, ordinary mages have lost their ability to be nodes and can only absorb magic floating around. But magic shooters can still cast spells with the help of the magic net. No wonder. Liszt suddenly understood. Mages with the support of the magic net were obviously not afraid of the knight's charge. But when the magic net shrunk, ordinary mages were immediately defeated, and the knight's charge formed the so-called anti-magic zone. Achi continued, "In Achi's feeling just now, brother, you are like a smaller version of the magic net. You have your own field and net, so the knight's training and battle will not be restricted by the magic net. On the contrary, when a large number of knight gather, their respective magic nets will resonate, and thus expand the influence of the magic net." Then, is the magic net still continuing to shrink? Yes. That means that magic shooters will lose the support of the magic net sooner or later. Achi does not know, but with the current extent of the magic net's shrinking, it will probably only abandon magic shooters after thousands of years. Chapter 654. Liszt needed to digest the information about the weave, hoping to use it for his own night training. After all, Achi said that he felt like an independent version of the weave, which would probably have some similarities with the real weave. But right now he was most concerned about Achi. "Achi, can you continue to access the weave?" The reason why Achi was able to access the weave just now was because of the magic array activated by the tears of the mermaid. Now there is no way to enter the weave. But Achi has already memorized the information about the entrance to the weave. With some preparations, she should be able to access the weave freely soon. "So, you will soon be promoted to a magic shooter." Yes. Achi could not hold back her laughter and whispered, "My brother is a dragon knight, and Achi is also a magic shooter." Liszt took Achi's hand in high spirit. "Haha, that's right. A dragon knight and a magic shooter. With such an inflated strength, there was nothing to be afraid of. Whether it was the Sapphire Grand Duke, who wanted to rob his Ghostblade inheritance, or the possible dragon-slaying war launched by Alonso Cassiopeia, it was not a big deal for him. Perhaps Leo was too young, and he was only a new dragon knight. His combat power could not guarantee that he could resist the dragon knight for many years. With Achi's assistance, the dragon knight had to carefully consider whether it would be killed under the baptism of magic. Dragon fighting energy could defeat magic, but the level of magic casting would be different. "Achi, you have to continue to work hard and get promoted to a magic shooter as soon as possible. I will also strive to get Leo's approval as soon as possible and become a real dragon knight." "Yes. Let's rest for the night above the Temple of Fish Clown and see if we can take Isra to Black Horse Island tomorrow. By the way, Achi, I feel that although you and Isra are both sirens, you don't feel close to your own kind. Why is that?" Liszt asked his own doubts. Achi is not sure. Although she is a siren, Achi feels that she is not the same kind. Achi thought carefully, probably just like elves do not feel that they are the same kind. Sirens are the elves of the sea, and they have the same thinking. Hearing this, Liszt expressed his understanding. Achi was born in a scallop shell, while Easy was born in a conch shell, so they were indeed not of the same species. The two quickly left the Temple of the Ugly Fish. At this time, Liszt saw the harpoon stuck in the entrance of the temple. He suddenly remembered that the reward of the smoke mission was protection of the ugly fish. Could it be this harpoon? He motioned for Ichi to wait for a moment, and then pulled out a very large harpoon. The harpoon was the size of a pillar, with 5 spikes at the front. It was about 5 meters long. It wasn't made of metal, but some kind of special bone that was polished and pieced together. In the observation of the magic eyes, there was a faint mana retroaction light inside, which was light blue. It should be water attribute magic. Amidst the pale blue light, there was also a pale green light, somewhat similar to the magic light of a lich like Curtis Truth. Don't tell me the undead spirit fish is hiding in this harpoon? He wasn't in a hurry to study it. He first dragged the harpoon to the surface of the sea and released the sampan before slowly studying the harpoon and the necro fish. At the same time, he summoned the smoke mission. Sure enough, it was completed. Mission completed. Reward: protection of the ugly fish. The new mission was quickly issued, and it made him feel refreshed. Mission: since Ichi already has the ability to advance to Magic Shooter, as a half-step Dragon Knight, you have to work hard. Little Fire Dragon Leo is the first dragon you have. No matter what means you use, conquer it first and then talk about other things. Reward: perfection of Chi. Conquer Leo. It seems that the enigmatic dragon fruit is used as a drug. List suppressed the excitement in his heart and didn't continue to be excited. Everything had to wait until he conquered Leo. At that time, he would not only be a dragon knight, but also a sky knight at perfection. Ichi sat in the shell and pondered. Touching the magic net had a huge impact on her. She needed time to digest and find a way to touch the magic net again to truly advance to Magic Shooter. List ate a delicious meal and began to study the harpoon. This harpoon was definitely a weapon similar to magic equipment, and the undead spirit fish was called protection, so it should be able to be controlled. Usually, he would leave this kind of research to Ichi or Chris. However, Ichi was thinking seriously, so List didn't disturb her and decided to study by himself. He ran a little further to avoid affecting Ichi. Then he poured chi into it and tried to activate the harpoon. Unfortunately, he had fire attribute chi, which was obviously incompatible with the harpoon's attribute. After pouring chi into the harpoon, not only did it not activate it, but it also caused the magic inside the harpoon to riot, almost destroying the weapon. Forget it, I'll study it later. He carefully moved the gem space and finally made a space of 5 meters. Then he wrapped the harpoon with chi and put it into the gem space. The night passed like this. Early the next morning, the two continued on their way back to the place where they met Isis. Sadly, EC was no longer there, and Ichi couldn't sense EC's location. Big brother, EC has left this reef. Is that so? List felt that it was a pity. Although Isis was old, it shouldn't be a problem for her to live for another few decades, so she could still play a role. However, since Isis had left, it meant that she had no intention of coming into contact with human life again. So List didn't force it. Since she doesn't want to go back with us, then let's go. Don't worry about her. 2 days later, in the evening, List and Ichi returned to Flower Town. However, unexpectedly, the Count hadn't returned yet. Calculating the time, it took him about a week to excavate the Temple of Fish Clown. The voyage from the roaring estuary to Coral Island took 10 days. If the Count and others had not set off in advance, they would not have come back so soon. There were 2 most important things that happened in the territory. One was that Marcus had sorted out the merits of the knight who participated in the war. After the Grand Duke's iron or merits were settled, the merits could be distributed according to the proportion. The other was that 2 unusual plants were found after the census of the farmland in the territory. One is a very vigorous and huge peanut seedling, located in the peanut plantation opened in Newport Town, Black Horse Island. The other is a significantly taller and thicker oat seedling, belonging to the few oat fields preserved in Flower Town. Because there was no oat worm in the territory, After having the wheat sprite and 2 little wheat worms, the territory officials had decided not to plant oats anymore. This was the last crop. Unexpectedly, an oat worm was bred. List personally went to check and confirm the existence of the oat worm. He told Flower Town Administrative Officer Isaiah to protect the worm stock. The next day, he did not go to Black Horse Island to check whether the peanut worm was pregnant. Chapter 655. On the Dodo Island. The fruits of the human skull tree hung all over the branches. No one picked them, and not many birds flew over to peck at them. Many of the fruits simply rotted on the tree. Every time List came, he would pick some and bring them back. He mainly dug out the seeds of the human skull fruit for planting in the human skull tree plantation. However, he was too lazy to spend too much time picking the human skull fruit. His time was precious, and there was no need to work hard for a few seed. Achi, wait here. I'll go feed the little fire dragon, Leo. Okay. Achi nodded simply. She seemed a little absent-minded. She was still immersed in the extraordinary experience of touching the magic net. List went straight to the crater of the volcano. After calling out, the already hungry Leo rushed out. Previously, List and Achi had gone to excavate the ruins, so it could only starve on the island. Now that it had turned into a body of flesh and blood, it landed in front of List. It roared loudly to express its dissatisfaction. Roar. Its eyes were also very fierce. It was as if List was only its *T shoveling officer. Seeing this, List only smiled. He was too lazy to argue with it. It was just an ungrateful wretch. You want to eat beef? Leo urged. Roar. List took out the grilled steak bit by bit and gave it to Leo to swallow. When Leo was halfway through eating, List began to put the steak with the mystical dragon's soul fruit to Leo's mouth. Dragons were very intelligent, and List was afraid that it would become suspicious of the mystical dragon's soul fruit, so he covered it up. Leo, who was eating happily, did not seem to know the sinister intentions of the human in front of it. It directly chewed the steak twice and swallowed it. After it had eaten its fill, it was time to feed List back to his cultivation. Just as it was about to stand up and spit out dragon breath, its head suddenly sank, and its body staggered, almost falling. Seeing this, List's eyes lit up. However, he did not do anything and continued to observe. Leo's stagger was just the beginning. It quickly stood up, but its eyelids became heavier. He seemed to be dozing off. At this time, List finally made his move. He quietly touched Leo's back, but Leo didn't react. He didn't even bat an eyelid. When he gradually crawled towards the Dragon Fong platform, Leo seemed to realize something and his body started to struggle weakly. However, the degree of struggle was too small. He couldn't even turn his head around. It could only allow List to support its scales to the dragon tooth platform. It was located between the forelimbs and the shoulder blades, where the neck and the body met. There was a flat area the size of a washbasin, and there was a protruding bone in front of it. On both sides of the bone were whirlpools. Such a structure was just right for people to ride comfortably. Looking at the dragon tooth platform in front of him, List did his best to restrain his excitement. He placed his feet on the whirlpool, then sat down on the platform with his thumping heart. In the next second, he felt refreshed, and the battle energy in his body uncontrollably connected with Leo's magic energy under his butt. Boom! In the blink of an eye, the world changed. It became as if time had stopped, leaving only him riding a dragon. This feeling was exceptionally wonderful, mysterious, and indescribable. Then he felt himself floating, or to be precise, his soul floated, as if his soul had left his body. There was no nervousness, only curiosity about the wonderful feeling. As he flew, the scene in front of him suddenly changed. It was a scene of the end of the world when a volcano erupted. He was standing on the cliff of the crater, facing a huge fire dragon tied up by colorful chains. The fire dragon's body flickered with flames as it stared at him fiercely. Leo? List was a little puzzled. It looked like the little fire dragon Leo, but its body was more than 10 times larger, and its ferocity exceeded the beauty of a dragon's strength. The fire dragon did not respond. It just stared at List, flames spewing out of its nostrils. It wanted to move, but it was held back by the colorful chains, unable to move. Taking advantage of this gap, List looked down at himself. He wore the leather armor he wore today. He had no weapons or other equipment, including the gem space on his chest. Am I in a soul state? He looked at the locked fire dragon in front of him, and then at the misty smoke entwined around his body. He seemed to understand the situation. Leo. Is this an illusion after riding on the Dragon Tooth platform, or is it a spiritual connection? He looked at the colorful chains on the fire dragon and the misty smoke around his body. It should not be an illusion, but some kind of spiritual communication. He paused. He raised his head and responded to the ferocious fire dragon's gaze without any fear. This should be the first contest of the Dragon Tooth platform? The power of the mystifying dragon's soul fruit should turn into colorful chains to bind Leo's soul, which is the evil fire dragon in front of me. And he himself was also a projection of the soul. However, the smoke entwined around his body seemed to be the power of another smoke dragon that belonged to the Holy Dragon sequence. He waved his hand and naturally put a wisp of smoke into his palm. Is this the power of fate? If I defeat Leo's soul today, will I be able to ride the dragon? Whoosh. He seemed to have sensed List's thoughts. Leo, who was bound by the colorful chains in front of him, let out a low roar. List smiled lightly. The power of the mystifying dragon's soul fruit is really strong. If it was a normal spiritual contest, I might not be the evil dragon's match. But now it seems to be easy to defeat Leo's soul. Why don't I take this chance to test the power of fate? His fingers trembled slightly. The smoke entwined around his body immediately gathered in his palm. After a series of transformations, it condensed into an azure greatsword. It was his sword, Ice Soul Dragon Slaying Sword. No, I want a fire attribute sword. His heart moved. The Ice Soul Dragon Slaying Sword instantly turned crimson red. Waves of fire attribute magic spread out and circulated. Satisfied, he held the sword hilt. List walked step by step towards the restrained evil fire dragon. Leo, I know you are Leo. You are an elemental dragon with evil thoughts in your heart. This is not good, very bad. I am a knight filled with a sense of justice. As my mount, you must also abide by justice. Today, let me destroy the evil thoughts in your heart. After saying that, clang, the red Ice Soul Dragon Slaying Sword danced. A powerful wave of fire warrior energy instantly burst out and slashed the evil fire dragon's head. Roar! The fire dragon screamed in pain. A flaming wound split open on its head. It opened its bloody mouth and wanted to spit out dragon breath. The colorful chains on its body glowed, and the dragon breath was extinguished before it could form. List had already launched a fierce attack. Waves of fire warrior energy crazily slashed the evil fire dragon's head and body. The wound continued to split open. Countless sparks shot out and fell into the bottomless abyss of the volcano. List and the evil fire dragon both stood on a cliff that was like a springboard. One sword after another. The evil fire dragon's body gradually became tattered. List still did not relax and continued to attack crazily. Until the Ice Soul Dragon Slaying Sword, which was formed by the power of fate, was shattered. It once again turned into illusory smoke and wrapped around List's body. At this time, the evil fire dragon completely collapsed. Rumble! The volcano trembled as if it would erupt at any time. The cliff continued to collapse and flames shot everywhere. After an unknown amount of time, on the broken cliff where the volcano was on the verge of erupting, a newborn fire dragon slowly condensed from the collapsed corpse of the evil fire dragon. When the little fire dragon saw List, it immediately rushed over excitedly. It rushed to List's feet and let out a cheerful cry. Roar, roar, roar! It put its head on List's head and motioned for him to ride on it. List rode on the little fire dragon. The little fire dragon flapped its wings and rushed out of the volcano. At the same time, the volcano completely collapsed. Then, a huge pillar of magma, accompanied by billowing black smoke, shot into the sky. Roar! The little fire dragon shouted. List turned his head to look at the doomsday scene behind him. He could not help but laugh loudly. Ha 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 ha! In the next moment, the scene in front of him twisted like water. He suddenly found that he had returned from the spiritual illusory world to the real world. He was still riding on Leo's dragon tooth platform, while Leo had already fallen to the ground and was snoring away. Sitting on Leo's body, List felt as if their fates were intertwined. It was as if the Leo in front of him had the same blood flowing in his veins and shared the same frequency of thought. Is this the Dragon Knight? Chapter 656. Leo was snoring loudly on the ground. List was a little reluctant to move his butt away from the dragon tooth platform. Using the connection of the platform, the feeling of fates blending, blood flowing, and thoughts synchronizing was too great. This was the Dragon Knight. It wasn't just a man riding a dragon, but a man and a dragon sharing the same fate. It was as if he had opened up his heart to Leo, and Leo had given everything to him. There were no reservations, no suspicions, only the harmony of the soul. It was said to be a man and a dragon, but they were actually one. The dragon's fighting energy was the cement, and their souls were the steel bars. A bridge spanned from north to south, and the natural moat became a path. The huge barrier between humans and dragons had completely disappeared when he was riding a dragon. Dragon Knight! The greatest goal of my life has finally been achieved today. He suddenly remembered the verse Lu Zhishan had written when he passed away in water margin, and he couldn't help but chant, I never cultivated good karma in my life, I only loved to kill and set fire. Suddenly, I loosened the golden rope and broke the jade lock. Qiantang River's tide came, and today I know who I am. Of course, he didn't comprehend parinirvana like Lu Zhishan and returned to the pure land of bliss. He just felt it, and only today did he know how great it was to ride a dragon. It was a pity that Leo had fainted due to the effects of the enchanting dragon's soul fruit. There was no way to immediately bring him to roam the skies. He could only slowly savor the thrill of riding a dragon. But at this moment, the fighting energy in his body suddenly surged. His heart moved. He quickly left Leo's dragon tooth platform and jumped off. Suddenly, he felt a sense of emptiness all over his body, and the harmonious feeling of being one with the dragon instantly faded away. However, he could still feel that Leo still had a lingering concern in his heart. After riding a dragon once, his soul had crossed a line once. Nothing could be changed. Just like a phone connected to Wi-Fi and remembered the password, unless the password was changed, it could be reconnected as long as it was near. Unless List abused Leo, Leo wouldn't be able to change the password. And he wouldn't casually abandon Leo, a fire dragon with unlimited potential. A day on a dragon, a lifetime on a dragon. He shook his head. Suppressing his desire to ride a dragon again, List examined his body. His combat aura had suddenly surged. It seems that because of the spiritual battle earlier, my combat aura has reacted. Is this the perfect combat aura reward from the smoke mission? He concentrated and summoned, and the smoke mission quickly appeared. Mission completed. Reward: perfect advanced chi. As expected, he had already completed the quest, and he received the reward almost at the same time that he rode on the dragon. Or, it could be said that the prerequisite for riding a dragon was to have a perfect high-level warrior energy. Under the influence of the smoke quest and the assistance of the enchanting dragon fruit, he was able to kill little fire dragon Leo's evil thoughts at the same time that his warrior energy reached the perfect level and successfully rode on the dragon. Just as he was about to look at the new mission, the Do Chi in his body surged again, diverting his attention. The smoke also quickly dissipated. He had no choice but to focus on dealing with the changes in his body. His Do Chi kept surging, stimulating and improving the strength of his body. Soon, he felt hungry and tired. Fortunately, List had prepared enough potions when he returned this time. He grabbed a handful of potions and swallowed them on the spot. When the potions entered his stomach, they quickly turned into surging magic power and replenished his dried-up cells. Then, they were refined into Do Chi and continued to improve his body. Then, he started to swallow the World of Warcraft meat in big mouthfuls to increase the nutrients in his body. Just like that. After swallowing a total of 50 potions, 5 Black Nightshade potions, and an entire cow's worth of World of Warcraft meat, his body's needs were finally satisfied. His Do Chi had completely calmed down, but there was an explosive power hidden in his body. It was as if his entire body had been opened up. Drawing the Ice Soul Dragon slaying sword, he directly used the Burning Red Sun Rising Fire secret manual. He used the basic moves and charged up moves one after another to experience the current state of his body. He circulated his Do Chi and used his combat skills without any hesitation. Every detail of his body was under his control. Putting away his sword, he looked at his slender fingers, which had both beauty and strength. He couldn't help but feel high-spirited. Is this the true meaning of a perfect level Sky Knight? Perhaps in terms of total Do Chi and explosive power, a perfect level Sky Knight wasn't much stronger than a Sword Saint level Sky Knight. But in terms of the details of his body, he was far better than a Sword Saint. It could be said that a Sword Saint could use 80% of their body's strength, and a perfect level Sky Knight could use 120% of their strength. Next, I have to find a way to obtain a Do Chi cultivation secret manual and completely perfect the Knight cultivation system. After all, the requirements for a Dragon Knight to ride a dragon are too harsh. I can rely on the enchanting dragon soul fruit to ride a dragon, but my descendants may not be able to. The Grand Duchy of Sapphire didn't have a Do Chi cultivation secret manual. He could only snatch it from the mainland kingdoms. List was more optimistic about Marquis Nuteo. He was lucky to defeat him in the previous battle, but he wasn't able to capture him alive. The next time the expansion order was issued, he could capture Marquis Nuteo alive in one go and force him to hand over the Do Chi cultivation secret manual. Leo was still unconscious. List sat cross-legged at the side and called out the smoke mission again. Mission: obviously, you have successfully ridden a dragon and become a real Dragon Knight. You can roam the world's generals, but it is undeniable that Leo is still young and has no clue about the next step of cultivation. Please restrain your mood of showing off and explore the next step of cultivation in a low-key manner. Reward: 1 magic shooter. He was pleasantly surprised. He didn't expect that a Chi would be promoted to magic shooter just after he became a Dragon Knight. Originally, he thought that a Chi would need at least a year and a half before she could break through to magic shooter. After all, she relied on the power of the mermaid's tears to touch the magic net. However, he carefully read the mission again and restrained his surprise. What does it mean to explore the next step of cultivation in a low-key manner? Does it mean that I have to explore the cultivation method to complete the mission? If I can't explore the next step of cultivation in a year and a half, doesn't that mean that a Chi can't advance to magic shooter? No matter what, he had to wait for Leo to wake up first and then try to explore the cultivation method. He was already riding a dragon, What was there to worry about not being able to explore the cultivation method? He got up and walked down the mountain all the way to the beach. He found that no matter how far away they were, there was a strong spiritual connection between him and Leo. Although it wasn't as strong as when he was riding a dragon, it was still far stronger than the contractual connection between him and the elves. As long as he thought about it, he could experience the beautiful dream that Leo had when he was asleep. He dreamed that he became a powerful fire dragon, robbed a city of wealth, and brought it back to his volcanic nest, still with evil thoughts. It seems that I have to cut his heart often to prevent evil thoughts from growing. After all, I am a knight full of a sense of justice, and my mount can't be an evil dragon. Full of love and peace, protecting justice and fairness, these are the true virtues of a knight. He was in a good mood, and the scenery of dusk was exceptionally beautiful. Chapter 657. Brother, did you end your training with Leo so soon? Achi, who was deep in thought, realized that List had returned early, so she asked curiously. List smiled reservedly. I didn't train, but I have successfully ridden a dragon and become a real dragon knight. He had originally planned to laugh out loud to express his excitement, but he still held it in and told the news with a calm expression. Ah! Achi shouted, her face full of surprise. Brother, you have successfully ridden a dragon. That's great. Brother, you are a real dragon knight. You are at the top of the world. Keep a low profile. Leo is still young, and he still needs to explore his training as a dragon knight. We have to keep a low profile for now. List waved his hand. Then he asked seriously, Achi, now that I have successfully ridden a dragon and become a real dragon knight, it is time to separate from the Tulip family. What do you think is the best surname for me? Normally, dragon knight families use the dragon as their surname, and the Sapphire Grand Duke uses the Sapphire as his surname. Achi tilted her head and thought for a while. Should we call it Flame? Flame is too vulgar. It doesn't match the dignity of a dragon knight. What about Flame? I think it's not high enough. How about Flame burning the sky? What do you think, Achi? List voiced out his opinion, but he quickly rejected it. Although Flame burning the sky is high enough, it doesn't fit the image as a surname. It is a verb. The naming rules of this world were mainly based on nouns. Sapphire, Tulip, Golden Ear of Wheat, Immortal Kalai, Eagle Sword, Black Knight, and so on all use nouns as surnames, or it could be said that they use certain gemstones, plants, or objects as surnames. Since List gave his blood servant the surname Daybreak, it was not strange to give him the surname Flame Burning the Sky. However, he still decided to follow the traditional rules and choose a noun as his surname, which would continue to be passed down in the Dragon Knight family. Lava? Volcano? Burning? Hot? He couldn't think of a better surname after thinking about it over and over again. In the end, he brought up the Flame that Achi mentioned before. Why don't we name it Flame for the time being? Anyway, the news of the Dragon Knight has to be handled in a low-key manner. We'll decide on the surname after the official separation. List Inferno made up his mind. Then he took out 2 juices from the gem space, handed one to Achi, and drank the other. Achi, celebrate with your brother. Yes. Cheers to my success in riding a dragon, and to Achi's early advancement to a magic shooter. After drinking the juice, he briefly talked about the feeling of riding a dragon and asked Achi to fill in the gap. It was basically confirmed that the Dragon Knight's contract to ride a dragon required a battle of the soul. Only by achieving harmony and unity in the battle of the soul could the knight share the same fate as the dragon. In addition to riding on the Dragon Fang platform, the triggering conditions for a battle of the soul with a dragon would require a perfected high-level Do Chi. The rest of the details needed to be slowly pondered. So after putting away the glass, Achi continued to meditate on the weave. List sat on the reef and thought about his dragon riding career. Without the dragon soul fruit, I don't know how long it would take me to dissolve Leo's hostility, get its approval, ride on the Dragon Fong platform, and carry out a battle of the soul. The outcome of the battle of the soul was also unknown. The battle of the soul is too difficult. I still have 2 dragon soul fruits, which means I can still have 2 opportunities to ride a dragon. One for the invisible dragon and one for the smoke dragon? List thought about it. Although the invisible dragon had a heavy taste, it had great strategic value. The value of a space gem was definitely far greater than any other gem. It was both a holy dragon and a gem dragon. It also had a good relationship with List, so it should be said that it was in the bag. As for the smoke dragon, I haven't figured out whether it exists or not. Did it infect me with the power of fate, or did it attach its power to me after its death and want to use me to resurrect? If it's the first, then am I a servant like Paris? Not really. The white dragon was in the state of a ghost and could only be transformed after death. The black dragon was always infected by the magic of the dragon and could be eroded at any time. Although he had the power of fate, there was no sign of erosion. He could still cultivate chi and ride a dragon smoothly. I'm afraid the smoke dragon wants to use my power to resurrect. When it resurrects, I guess we have been together for so long that it should not need the help of the dragon soul fruit. Moreover, the dragon soul fruit was drawn by the power of fate. There was no reason for the smoke dragon to harm itself. The smoke dragon should be put aside first. It's hard to say whether it wants to resurrect or not. Then, which dragon should I give the 3rd dragon soul fruit to? By the way, I need to contract a dragon to get the status of Dragon Domain Lord. This should be a young dragon. If I can find the fairy dragon that represents life and contract it directly, won't there be hope for immortality? The fairy dragon definitely existed. The invisible dragon and the smoke dragon both existed, so it was impossible for it not to exist. It was just that it was difficult to find it. If he used the power of fate, it was possible to find it. So this 3rd dragon soul fruit is estimated to be given to the fairy dragon. If I encounter other dragons along the way, I will try to use my own strength to ride the dragon. It is impossible for all dragons to ride with the help of the dragon soul fruit. Otherwise, all kingdoms would plant soul fruit trees in batches and allow their children to ride dragons at will. He remembered that the fire dragon was an evil dragon. It was arrogant, cruel, and evil, so the battle of the soul required defeating the evil dragon. If it was a gem dragon or a metal dragon, the battle of the soul would be different. Perhaps it was just a test of each other's temperament. The dragon probably needed to choose the most suitable knight through the battle of the soul. The right to use the dragon soul fruit was distributed. List exhaled a long breath of turbid air, jumped into the sea and swam freely, washing away the stinky sweat on his body. Just now, when he leveled up to advanced level, his body went through a strengthening, metabolizing a large amount of waste. It made his body stinky, which made him, who had a slight obsession with cleanliness, very uncomfortable. Chirp. The 7-colored whale Lolth came over and was ready to let List ride her. List patted her on the back, indicating that she could play by herself. He was ready to dive into the water himself to see how strong his body was now. Perfect chi, successful dragon riding. Although his strength had improved by leaps and bounds, his body was obviously not as strong as a dragon's. Maybe one day, he could switch between his physical body and dragon will form at will like a dragon. At that time, he would be able to ignore the strength of his physical body and do whatever he wanted. He practiced his swordsmanship in the water. He successfully tested the strength of his body. The amplification was more than doubled. A normal Sky Knight's ultimate move could only cause light injuries to him, unable to hurt his internal organs. However, a Sword Saint's attack could still cause serious damage. His body was now equivalent to normal steel. A simple punch without chi could probably kill a low-level World of Warcraft. Lolth, take me underwater. Let's see how deep I can dive. Chapter 658. This chapter is titled, Grow, 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 Grow. Rose could dive to a depth of 1,500 meters. List's previous test was 400 meters. He couldn't go any deeper. He still remembered the whales on Earth. The killer whale's diving limit was 260 meters, the blue whale's diving limit was 500 meters, the sperm whale's record was 2,035 meters, and the champion's record was the Korsha's beaked whale's 2,992 meters. This had nothing to do with strength. It was just a matter of body structure. The king of the ocean, the killer whale, was only 260 meters. Similarly, Achi was a spirit of the sea. She could dive to a depth of 1,500 meters without a problem. Rose could also dive to that depth. But a normal whale could dive to a depth of 2,000 or 3,000 meters, but it might not be able to beat Rose. Rose was a low-level dragon-type sea monster. At this time, Rose led List down. A rope used to determine the depth of the water was constantly released. The tip of the rope floated on the surface of the water. Maintaining a vertical position was the depth of the dive. As the depth of the dive increased, the pressure that the body felt was constantly magnified. They easily reached a depth of 400 meters. He touched Rose's dorsal fin. You can still continue. Rose, go down. Rose obediently followed his instructions and continued to dive deeper. The depth increased bit by bit. When they were about to reach 550 meters, he finally couldn't hold it anymore and signaled for Rose to stop. He wanted to familiarize himself with his body's tolerance at this depth and determine his diving limit. 550 meters, this is my new diving limit. After diving, he took a bath and had dinner. List returned to the crater and continued to wait for little Leo to wake up. Little fire dragon Leo was still having sweet dreams. His sweet dreams were a little monotonous. He just wanted to go out and rob people and bring the wealth back to his crater. Sparkling gems and gold coins were his favorite. Night fell and the moon shone brightly. List leaned on Leo's thigh. In his boredom, he suddenly thought that if he could experience Leo's sweet dreams, then if Leo wanted to, he should be able to experience List's sweet dreams as well. As long as Leo willed it, it would be able to sense what List was doing at night. No, absolutely not. Everyone needs a private life. List valued privacy very much, especially at night. I have to block the mental connection at this time, just like how I block the elves' mental connection. He had dozens of elves, and if all of them activated their senses, he would be overwhelmed by these emotions. Therefore, he did not need much training. After a period of exploration, he would be able to automatically block the emotional connection. Now, he was trying to figure out how to block Leo's spiritual connection, not only to prevent Leo from affecting his dragon riding career, but also to ensure his own privacy. The difficulty was high, but it was not impossible. It just needed time. In the first half of the night, he fumbled with the shield, and in the second half of the night, he fell asleep. The next morning, List woke up before the sun rose as usual. When he woke up, he saw the little fire dragon, Leo, turning his head to look at him. Leo had woken up at some point in time. When it saw that List had woken up, it immediately let out a cheerful roar. Roar! The mental connection allowed its emotions to fill List's heart. It was pure happiness. After getting rid of the evil thoughts, Leo no longer resisted List. Wait a moment, Leo. I need to brush my teeth and wash my face first. Roar! After List quickly washed up, he directly rode on Leo's back, who had been waiting for a long time. He sat down on the dragon-tooth platform, and it was as if he and the dragon had become one again. The battle energy in their bodies circulated, and their hearts also reached a harmonious frequency. They breathed and shared the same fate. He took a deep breath, waved his hand, and said loudly, "Let's go!" Roar! Leo's legs stepped on the cliff, and his body instantly leaped into the sky. His fleshy wings flapped, and he flew steadily into the sky. Their hearts were one, and they could move at will. There was no need for any verbal communication. Leo understood what Liszt was thinking, and Liszt also understood what Leo was thinking. They were one. They flew higher and higher, and they had already surpassed the height of 100 meters that a sky knight could fly. As far as the eye could see, Achi, who was deep in thought, had already become a small dot. A thought flashed in his mind. Let's go down and say hello to Achi. Leo had already cooperated and descended to the foot of the mountain. He flew extremely fast, and his body emitted a warm aura, but there was no heat. Even if the dragon-tooth platform under Liszt's but was like the scales on other parts of his body, with sparks flashing between the cracks, it would not cause any harm to Liszt. Fire dragons had absolute control over fire magic. As long as they did not want to, they would definitely not let magic casually transform into real flames. Whoosh! Wings swept past the skulls, and in the blink of an eye, one man and one dragon arrived at the seaside. They landed next to the rocks by the seaside where Achi was. This eye-catching appearance immediately caused the eyes of the little sea monster to flash with worship, surprise, and excitement. "Big brother!" Leo. Roar! The little fire dragon greeted in disdain. Towards people other than Liszt, it still had an arrogant and contemptuous mentality. In essence, it was just an evil dragon. If it were not for Liszt's spiritual guidance, it might not even look at Achi. It was the pinnacle of power, not a cat or a dog. Liszt patted Leo's head and told it to lie down. Then he turned over and jumped down, saying to Achi, "Come, I'll take you for a ride." Achi was stunned for a moment. But Achi can't leave the shell. Then take the shell with you. With that, Liszt directly lifted Achi's large shell, which was nearly 3 meters in diameter. Fortunately, he was now very strong, and after running the dragon's fighting spirit, it was not difficult to carry a heavy object. Roar! Leo objected to carrying the shell on its back. However, its objection was ineffective, so it could only turn its head and look at the sky, acting helpless. Leo let Liszt use a rope to fix the shell to the scales on its back. Leo was more than 20 meters long from head to tail. Its back was very wide, and it could not only sit people but also transport items. The sapphire dragon had been used as a means of transport in the past. Liszt tied the shell, quickly sat on the dragon-tooth platform, and motioned for Achi to sit in his arms. Achi's face flashed with a blush, but she still sat in Liszt's arms gladly. She was used to this kind of intimate behavior, although she had learned a lot after reading a lot of books and gradually became shy. She was growing up, and she was no longer the naive little siren who didn't know anything, but she still couldn't resist Liszt's intimate behavior. The soft jade in his arms. The feeling made him short of breath. Liszt forcibly suppressed his heart and urged Leo, who was a little unhappy, to take off and fly toward the blue sky and white clouds. "Leo, fly up, I want to know how high you can fly." The wings flap. Leo answered him with a majestic cry, "Roar!" Chapter 659. This chapter is titled, Fallen Feather Burial Wind. The wind was howling and the white clouds were rolling. Leo rushed to a height of thousands of meters in one go, and came to the clouds that were usually visible but unreachable. Feeling the wonderful feeling of the clouds brushing against his face, Liszt was extremely excited. Achi, who was in his arms, was already trembling with excitement, perhaps also a little frightened. As a spirit of the sea, she had never been so high in the sky. Roar! Leo let out a roar. He transmitted his thoughts to Liszt. He had climbed to the limit of his current flight ability. No matter how powerful he was, He was only a young dragon, and did not have the ability of an adult dragon to travel tens of thousands of meters in the sky. The reason why dragons were rare had a lot to do with their ability to fly high in the sky. The sky was full of clouds, and it was easy to hide. Since we have reached the limit, let's go down. List was just riding the dragon for a ride. It was very cold at high altitude. Although he and Achi had strong physical fitness and were more resistant to cold and heat, there was no need to suffer like this. Besides, the surrounding was full of clouds, and the scenery could not be seen clearly. It was more appropriate to circle around the island to enjoy the beautiful scenery. Leo immediately folded his wings and fell down, as if he was in free fall. Compared to the time it took to fly, free fall was obviously faster. In a few breaths, he could already see the skull trees on the island. Before falling to the ground, Leo stretched his wings in a thrilling way, and his huge body suddenly stopped falling. He bent a few skull trees, then flapped his wings and pulled up his body that weighed more than 10 tons, and began to fly steadily around the island. After 2 laps, he landed on the beach. List put Achi down, and the little siren was already flushed with excitement. She was probably the first siren to fly thousands of meters in the sky. "How is it? Does it feel exciting?" asked List. "Yes. Calm down, I will take Leo to complete this training first." He only cared about riding the dragon, and had not practiced dragon breath tempering and demonic dragon chi refinement. Moreover, he still had to explore the next step of training to complete the smoke mission, so as not to delay Achi's advancement to magic shooter. Compared to Leo's reluctance during the training, Leo was very cooperative this time. Furthermore, due to the spiritual bond, the human and dragon's minds were connected, allowing them to adjust the details of their cultivation at any time and increase the efficiency of their cultivation as much as possible. It took him half a day to complete the 2 cultivation method. For the rest of the afternoon, List tried out the new cultivation method. But deep into the night, he still couldn't figure out anything new. Seeing that the moon was about to set, List rubbed Leo's big head and said, "I'm going back tomorrow. You stay at the crater and train well." Roar. "And you mean you want to go back with me?" Roar. Through Leo's telepathic communication, List was pleasantly surprised to discover that Leo didn't need to stay in the lava every day. Basically, he could absorb the ultimate magic power condensed in the lava once a month to form his own dragon will. The rest of the time, he just soaked in the lava and slept. Obviously, Leo had been deceiving List before, or he didn't like to stay with List and other humans. Now, after the mind and soul became one, Leo began to be attached to List. This was a good thing. List quickly agreed. "You can go back with me, but you need to exist in the form of dragon will most of the time. Don't easily show your flesh and blood in front of others." Roar. Leo nodded in response. "Then you go down and absorb the dragon will condensed in the volcano, and we'll set off together tomorrow morning." Roar. Leo suddenly stuck out his big tongue and licked List's face. There was no saliva or dragon saliva, only warm fire magic. Then he suddenly took a step back and fell off the crater cliff. When he landed, his wings shook and he plunged into the rolling lava. The night passed. Early the next morning, with the hemp rope vine seeds and a batch of skull fruits, List called for Leo. Leo directly transformed into the dragon will and crashed into List's body, condensing into a fire dragon pattern in the form of flames on his chest. Down the mountain. He called the colorful whale Lolth, who was playing on the beach, and then called Achi, and directly returned. 10 hours later, they arrived at Black Horse Port in the afternoon. He let Achi take the previously contracted seaweed sprite to the seaside villa in Flower Town first. List was ready to inspect his territory. There was a peanut sprite that might breed a sprite worm, but he didn't check it. "Sir, you are finally back." Gort came to greet him. "What happened in the territory?" "Sir Count has returned to Tulip Castle." Yesterday afternoon, a messenger knight was sent to invite you to Tulip Castle to participate in a family banquet. Really? Did the messenger knight say anything about the follow-up of the development order? Simply put, the iron ore mine in Kurong Mountain has been moved out, a total of 12 million tons of iron ore. No Dragon Knight rushed back to compete for the iron ore mine, but the first prince announced the end of the development order in advance after all the iron ore mines left the Eagle Kingdom coastline. They have all returned smoothly? List was surprised. This time, 12 million tons of iron ore were looted, but no Dragon Knight was dispatched. The Count had looted no more than 200,000 tons of iron ore and was chased by a Dragon Knight. The comparison between the two was incredible. The messenger knight said that Sapphire's orders of chivalry have all returned safely. Not only did the Coral Island orders of chivalry not decrease, but there were also 800 more Earth Knights than when they set off. Sir Count's promotion to the rank of Marquis is already clear. The Grand Duke personally announced it in Iron Hoof Island's Oxhoof City. The Grand Duke went to Oxhoof City? Yes, the Grand Duke personally oversaw Oxhoof City and held a military merit conference. It was basically clear that Sir Count's military merit is enough to be promoted to Marquis. Sir Count has even discussed which part of Iron Hoof Island to choose as his fief. Which part did my father choose? The messenger knight doesn't know. Sir Count doesn't seem to have announced his choice to the public. Basically, the messenger knight explained these things. The specific details could only be known after List personally went to Tulip Castle. In order to urgently know the news, List did not stay in Port Town. He rode the 7-colored whale Lolth and hurried to Newport Town. He inspected the peanut plantation. Sure enough, the peanut sprout was pregnant with a sprite worm. After instructing the security group's worm protection team to look after the worm stalks, he returned to Flower Town without stopping. He then returned to the castle to take a bath and change his clothes. Riding the chocobo Loki, he quickly rushed to Tulip Castle. He arrived just before dark. His arrival quickly alarmed Tulip Castle. The Count personally led his family and many servants to the gate of Tulip Castle to welcome him. Chapter 660. The son of glory of the Tulip family was once a polite flattery, but now it had become a fact. If List could not be called the son of glory, then the Grand Duchy of Sapphire probably did not have a son of glory. He was the youngest Sky Knight and the successor of the Ghostblade. He had defeated the Domain Knight and captured the Sword Saint. He had seized the iron mine and obtained the largest iron ore harvest in the past 100 years. Such a flashy feat could be described as a road of sparks and lightning. It was very difficult not to attract attention. Now that the expansion order had ended and the process of the war had spread throughout the kingdom, nobles and commoners on every island were probably talking about List. Even in the Eagle Kingdom, List's name was well known in a small circle. At least in the Roaring Estuary, all the nobles knew him. With such a strong son, Earl Lee William had to personally welcome him at the door to show his respect and attention to List. Naturally, the family and servants of the strong family had to show their respect. The once invisible and timid second son of the family had completely disappeared. Now, in everyone's eyes, List was a brilliant genius and hero. There was no dispute that he was the most outstanding descendant of the Tulip family. Father, thank you for welcoming me personally. This is the treatment you deserve. I am proud of you, my son. Lee William reached out and patted the shoulder of List, who was already a head taller than him. He always felt that the glory of the night was on List alone. He had the strength to suppress the top masters, the handsome face that could charm thousands of girls, and the luck of picking up an elf. Any one of these was enough to make people crazy with jealousy, not to mention all three. He turned around and said to Madame Marie, "Go tell the kitchen to prepare a New Year's banquet tonight. Okay, you father and son talk more. I will personally supervise the preparation of the kitchen. Madame Marie smiled and left. The Earl then said to Lytton, "Go tell grandmother and sister that we will attend the banquet tonight." Then he said to Loria, "Go make a pot of tea and send it to the study. We will go to the study and chat for a while." "Yes, father." Loria also smiled and left. Only Lee William, Levis, and List were left. They went straight to the study. Regarding the Tulip family, the decision had to be made by these three men. To be precise, Lee William and List had to negotiate with each other. Levis was just a bystander. "Father, did the transportation of the iron ore go smoothly?" It was surprisingly smooth. Alonso Cyclamen never showed himself, but we didn't dare to stay at the mouth of the roaring estuary for too long. The iron ore Dragon Mountain belonged to Alonso Cyprus. Cyprus of Alonso Cyprus night did not show. Dragon of Cyprus Cyprus of Cyprus, Dragon Cyprus of, after of Cyprus of Dragon. Even if he could not come, he should have sent someone to fight for it. In order to show his presence, Levis quickly interrupted, "Father and I have already discussed this. We feel that it is possible that the war at the border is bothering Alonso. In addition, all the domain knights below the rank of Dragon Knight cannot defeat you, so we might as well strategically give up on the iron mine at Trapped Dragon Mountain." List nodded. "That is a possibility." For now, this possibility was more logical, so he did not continue to think about it. He had already succeeded in riding a dragon. No matter what kind of threat he faced, he would be safe. He was more concerned about the distribution of war credit. Then how does the big guild define our war credit? How many tons of iron ore will they give us? Where is the marquisdom that he promised father? What does he think about me and the Grand Duke? We obtained the main war credit for stealing iron ore, but a large part of the war credit for transporting the iron ore was given to us. I estimate that the big guild will give us 100,000 tons of iron ore. The Earl said with a pained expression, "This part of the iron ore will naturally belong to you." List smiled and did not say anything. The war credit belonged to the Earl, and the spoils of war belonged to him. This was already agreed upon. The Earl continued, "The Grand Duke is directly guarding Iron Hoof Island. Although everyone was wrangling during the War Credit Conference, the Grand Duke clearly told me after the conference that I could choose one of the three marquisdoms of Iron Hoof Island, Oxdale and Oxhoof, as well as the marquisdom of Iron Hoof City." "Why is there another marquisdom of Iron Hoof City? Father, what is your choice?" "Iron Hoof City is a big city second only to Blue Dragon City, where the palace is located. A marquisdom of the Blue Blood Alliance will be able to supervise Iron Hoof Island. I chose the marquisdom of Oxdale. The marquisdom of Oxdale needs to face the mainland directly. The marquisdom of Oxhorn is more complicated, while the marquisdom of Oxdale is relatively more peaceful." Lee William's thoughts leaned towards the middle. Oxhorn City was the starting point of Sapphire's attack on the mainland, so it naturally had to shoulder the heavy responsibility of suppressing the sea. Oxhorn City was once a prosperous city no less than Iron Hoof City. Sapphire's various underground forces were mixed in Oxhorn City. Only Oxdale City was not so eye-catching and suitable for low-key development. The Tulip family was only a Count family, and its background was far worse than that of the Taro family. It needed time to develop. Choosing the marquisdom of Oxdale would allow him to govern the big city of Oxdale City, as well as the two big cities of Oxdale City and Oxdale City, as well as the vast surrounding land, which was enough for the family to develop. "It's a good choice." List nodded, expressing his understanding. The Count glanced at List with a complicated look in his eyes and said, "There is another reason why I chose the marquisdom of Oxdale. The Grand Duke wants me to choose the marquisdom of Oxdale." because the Grand Duke told me that among the 3 marquisdoms of Iron Hoof Island, the Marquisdom of Oxdale has the weakest development potential, but he wants to leave the Marquisdom of Iron Hoof City to you. In this way, the combined forces of us father and son will surpass the Marquisdom of Oxdale and Oxhorn. List could not deny this. Checks and balances. But I prefer to stay in Black Horse Island and Flower Town, where I work hard to develop my foundation. I also don't want to follow the Grand Duke and become a Marquisdom of the Blue Blood Alliance. In addition to robbing, the aristocrats of the Blue Blood Alliance relied on the Grand Duke for survival. List was not even willing to be a follower of the Grand Duke, let alone a hound in the hands of the Grand Duke. Even the Marquisdom was not rare. After all, he was a dragon knight who wanted to build his own country. You still have a lot of time to think about it. This time, all your military exploits will be given to me, but after all, it is too much. I believe that as long as you choose to follow the Grand Duke, I can still share some of the military exploits and meet the conditions for your promotion to count. If you join the Blue Blood Alliance, I'm afraid you can directly be promoted to the Marquisdom of Iron Hoof City. Inwardly, the Count hoped that List would choose the Marquisdom of Iron Hoof City. Iron Hoof City was the largest city of Iron Hoof Island, and its attached territory was not much smaller than that of an ordinary count. With List's strength, it was unlikely that he could be ordered around by the Grand Duke at will like the other Blue Blood aristocrats. Basically, he was equivalent to half a feudal and half a Blue Blood aristocrat lord. If he joined forces with the upcoming Marquisdom of Oxdale, they could become the largest force of Iron Hoof Island. At that time, the Tulip family would become a true great aristocrat second only to the Sapphire family. But to his disappointment, List simply shook his head. I can't follow the Grand Duke directly. Brother, I'll have to trouble you to go out and see if there's anyone walking around and send them away. Chapter 661. Levis walked out of the study and closed the door. He was not a fool. Naturally, he could hear that List wanted to send him away. Although he was unwilling at this stage, he really did not participate in the family's high-level secrets. In the study, the Count and List sat in large chairs. Just now, Rolia came and brought a few cups of brewed tea. The Count sipped the tea and waited for what List was about to say. He was really a little curious. His son seemed to be unwilling to follow the Grand Duke. Logically speaking, being able to become a follower of a greater noble was something to be excited about. Being a direct follower of the Grand Duke was certainly more opportunities and benefits than being a follower of a count or a marquis. This kind of good thing was something that other aristocrats would definitely break their heads to get, but when it came to his son, he simply refused. It was really hard to understand. Last time it was okay. List was just a viscount. Even if he followed the Grand Duke, he would not get too much of an important position. It was better to follow the Count and help the family compete for glory. This time, the Marquis was in sight. With such a great status and glory, it was unreasonable to refuse again. He did not understand. List was very clear about what he was doing. The reason why he did not want to follow the Grand Duke was very clear. He was a noble dragon knight, and the Grand Duke may only be the lord of the dragon domain. The Sapphire Dragon was also disabled. How could a dragon knight be loyal to a disabled lord of the dragon domain? If Leo found out that he was subservient to a disabled Sapphire Dragon, he would probably go crazy on the spot. Father, you must be wondering why I don't want to follow the Grand Duke or separate from the family. List said calmly. The reason is very simple. I don't like the surname Macroalgae. It doesn't sound dignified, and I have a more noble surname to choose from. Don't like the surname Macroalgae? What a strange reason. The Count found himself more and more unable to understand his son. What noble surname do you have to choose from? I haven't thought about this surname yet. The Count was stunned. What? Liszt weighed his words. According to my inference, the Grand Duke did not succeed in riding a dragon at all. He is just a lord of the dragon domain. Moreover, the sapphire dragon was severely injured. Not only did it not recover, but it was also likely to lose its lifespan. That's why I shouldn't follow such a lord. He despised the sapphire Grand Duke a little. Back then, the Grand Duke who appeared on a dragon was really impressive. He looked like he was riding a dragon in a noble manner, making people think that he was really a dragon knight. However, in the end, he was just a lord of the Dragon City. At this moment, Liszt was organizing his words and summarizing the pros and cons to see how he should inform the Count of his identity. Now that he no longer needed to be overly cautious, it was time to communicate with the Count, and let the Count weigh the future of the Tulip family. Once the country was established, the Tulip family would definitely follow him. Now, how the Tulip family would develop in the Grand Duchy of Sapphire was another plan and strategy. The Count did not know this. Hearing Liszt's words, he suddenly frowned and his tone became serious. Liszt, I know you are strong. As a Ghostblade inheritor, you can defeat a domain knight. But the strength of the Grand Duke must not be underestimated. Even if he is not a dragon knight, just a lord of the dragon domain, he can still easily kill any ancient warrior inheritor. In fact, he can't kill me. Even in a fair fight, the Grand Duke is likely to be unable to beat me. You are too young and arrogant. Is it the defeat of a domain knight that makes you so blindly confident, or is it the Ghostblade inheritor that makes you think that you are stronger than a dragon? Father, I know the strength of a dragon better than anyone. Then you should understand your current identity. You still need to respect the Grand Duke in order to develop in the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. Have a sip of tea first, let me organize my words. Liszt reached out and motioned the Count to calm down. His expression was indifferent, as if everything was under control. He was a dragon knight, and Achi was a magic shooter. Although they had not grown to their peak, their combined strength was definitely enough to compete with the Sapphire Grand Duke. And his identity would be announced sooner or later. It was impossible to keep it a secret for a lifetime, and he was not willing to bury his head in wretchedness. The Count was by far the most suitable person to inform at the first time. With the Count's cover, his identity as a dragon knight could still be concealed. But it also saved him the trouble of following the Grand Duke. The Grand Duke had given him the option to follow twice, and it was difficult to explain his repeated refusal. Although he was not willing to bow to the Lord of the Dragon Domain, if it was beneficial to his development, it was not impossible to endure humiliation first. But he was more worried about one thing. The Grand Duke had been with dragons for decades, and now he had become the Lord of the Dragon Domain. What if the Grand Duke discovered his identity as a dragon knight when he pledged allegiance to him on the spot? At that time, he was afraid that it would not just be a matter of pledging allegiance, but it was likely to involve a battle of dragon slaying. One should not have the heart to harm others, but the heart to guard against others. Who knew when the Sapphire Grand Duke found a dragon knight whose strength had not yet risen, would he choose to care for and provide an environment for growth, or would he choose to use violent means to rob the young dragon? There was a 99% chance that he would rob the young dragon and leave it for his own family to survive. At that time, whether Liszt defeated the Grand Duke or the Grand Duke defeated Liszt, it would set off huge waves. If a foreign dragon knight took advantage of the situation, he was afraid that at that time, the situation would not be able to be cleaned up. So the Count's cover was very necessary. A father would prevent his son from pledging allegiance to others in order to make more achievements for himself. It might seem greedy to outsiders, but it was indeed an excuse that made people speechless. After a moment, he had figured out the details, so he told the truth about his identity. I have to confess one thing to you. There's no such thing as a slayer's inheritance. It's just a cover. I've been practicing the orthodox knight cultivation system from beginning to end. I'm just a sky knight. There is no Ghostblade inheritance? The Count's face changed, and then he stared at List. But your strength is stronger than a domain knight. Don't tell me that this is because of your talent. Half of it is because of my talent, and the other half is very simple. I am a dragon knight. He calmly revealed his identity. What? The Count suspected that he had heard wrong. List seriously repeated, I am already a dragon knight. Dragon knight? The Count stretched out his hand, and his expression was very stiff. You mean, dragon knight, a dragon knight riding a dragon? It's a fire dragon. Fire dragon? Evil dragon? Don't worry, I will restrain it from doing evil. The Count heard this and nodded slightly, as if he had accepted this fact. He leaned back in his chair, and then picked up his half-drunk tea on the table, his movements very casual. However, List still carefully noticed that the tea in the transparent glass cup was trembling slightly. He wanted to bring the cup to his mouth, but the cup trembled more and more, and eventually his whole arm trembled. The tea in the cup almost spilled out, but he could not bring it to his mouth. Finally, the tea in the cup was shaken out by him, and a large amount spilled on his chest, but he did not seem to feel it. He looked at the void in front of him. Dragon Knight, right? You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.